Chapter 371. Situ Xianxia felt that Chu Liyue's words were ear-piercing. The look in her eyes changed and the corners of her mouth curled up, but she quickly pulled it down. When Rong Jin saw the bright smile on Chu Liyue's face, he felt conflicted. Getting engaged with Situ Xianxia was his best choice now. When everything went smoothly, he secretly rejoiced. With Situ Xianxia around, everything would be much easier after that. He originally thought that he didn't care much about Chu Liyue. After all, Situ Xianxia didn't lose to Chu Liyue in any aspect. However, he only realized that this wasn't the case at this point. As for the Empress, she couldn't hear what Chu Liyue was saying. She looked pitiful, and her eyes were lifeless as she looked at Emperor Zhaowen's cold and decisive back view. She felt hopeless. If it weren't for Rong Jin and Situ Xianxia supporting her, she would have long collapsed on the floor. Chu Liyue looked at the Empress in deep thought before he turned around and followed Chu Ning. When they reached the palace entrance, Eunuch Min had already arranged for a normal horse carriage to wait for them. Chu Liyue couldn't help but sigh. Eunuch Min is indeed smart to be able to serve Emperor Zhaowen for so many years. Emperor Zhaowen is still wearing his dragon robe. If he goes out like this, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. Also, the Empress is in a terrible state and she can't meet anyone. Using such a normal horse carriage can reduce the trouble to the greatest extent. The group of people then walked toward Heptagon Alley in a low-key manner. Emperor Zhaowen sat in his own horse carriage and only Eunuch Min followed him. The rest of the people shared a horse carriage. In the horse carriage, everyone sat facing each other and nobody spoke. The atmosphere was tense and the air seemed to have frozen. Finally, Rong Jin couldn't help but softly persuade her. "Mother, don't worry. Someone wants to frame us, but they might not have the ability to do so. Father has always been wise and he'll definitely be able to distinguish right from wrong and clear your name." This someone was naturally referring to Rong Jiu. In Rong Jin's opinion, if Rong Jiu didn't interfere, this matter wouldn't have developed to this state. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Rong Jiu, who was sitting opposite him, and hatred flashed across his eyes. Previously, because of Rong Jiu, he was grounded by his father and had many of his rights taken away. This time it was because of him. However, Rong Jiu leaned against the wall with his eyes closed. His expression was calm as if he didn't care about all of this. "Rong Jiu, we have no feud with you. Aren't you afraid of retribution for framing us?" Rong Jin finally couldn't hold it in and questioned her softly. Rong Jiu opened his eyes and looked at him expressionlessly. "Imperial brother, why do you say that?" "I just wanted to help father find Rong Zhen. What I said in the main hall was the truth." "What do you mean by framing?" Rong Jin almost exploded in anger when he saw that Rong Jin still refused to admit it. If it weren't for the fact that they were in a horse carriage and that there were many people around, he would have long gone forward and harshly beaten Rong Jiu up. Chu Liyue sat at the side and started chatting with Chu Ning. "Father, actually, the trip to Taiyan Academy this time was quite interesting." Chu Ning was originally a little worried, but he felt much more at ease when he saw that his daughter was very calm. Hearing her talk about Taiyan Academy, he couldn't help but be curious. "Oh, really? I heard that their library is very big. What did you read?" Chu Liyue smiled and said, "Actually, I didn't read much. Actually, I didn't look at many, but I did find some that I liked." At the side, Situ Xianxia's eyelids harshly twitched. "Didn't read much?" Chu Liyue really has the cheek to say this. I clearly remember that not long after Chu Liyue went in, the records outside were already stacked up. The more hateful thing was that, according to Mentor, she even found an Earth Stage warrior technique. Even though Situ Xianxia had always been studying celestial physician and wasn't very interested in warrior techniques, she still felt very disgusted when she saw that Chu Liyue had obtained such a treasure. Every word of hers sounded like she was purposely showing off. Situ Xianxia couldn't maintain the smile on her face as she looked down and pretended to be quiet. The Empress gradually regained her senses. When she saw Chu Liyue and Chu Ningjing chatting happily, her heart burned with anger. All of this is clearly Chu Liyue's fault. I must have hidden Rong Zhen and colluded with Rong Jiu to frame me. Now my heart is hanging in midair and I'm being tortured, but Chu Liyue can still smile so easily. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Hearing the sound of the horse carriage on the limestone floor, the Empress knew that they were getting closer to Heptagon Alley, and she became increasingly anxious. Finally, she couldn't help but curse and pounce on Chu Liyue. Chu Luiyue had already seen her actions from the corner of his eyes, so he gently dodged and avoided her. Dong. A low sound was heard. The Empress's head directly hit the wall of the horse carriage. Mother! Rongjin and Situ Xingqian didn't manage to pull the Empress back in time. When they heard the sound, it was already too late. The Empress's forehead hurt and her vision turned black. Mother, are you okay? Rongjin was very anxious as he hurriedly helped the Empress up. Situ Xingqian knitted her brows. Miss Chu, even if you're unhappy with the Empress, you shouldn't do this. During this period of time, the fourth princess went missing and the Empress was worried. How could she withstand such a collision? Upon hearing this, Rongjin looked at Chu Luiyue with more hatred and anger. Chu Luiyue blinked. Eldest Princess Situ, your words are too interesting. Everyone saw clearly what happened just now. The Empress bumped into me on her own. If I didn't dodge, should I just sit there and wait to be hit? Situ Xingqian seemed to hesitate for a while and said, but you're very strong and it's easy for you to stop the Empress. In other words, Chu Luiyue did it on purpose. Chu Luiyue laughed. Eldest Princess Situ, the Crown Prince isn't weak either. Are you saying that he's useless and can't hold his mother back? Situ Xingqian was stumped. She didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so sharp-tongued. Knock knock knock. Masters, were here. Please come down. Eunuch Min knocked on the door outside. Rongjie walked out first. Chu Luiyue and Chu Ning followed closely behind. The horse carriage stopped in a narrow alley, and Emperor Jiawen stood at the entrance of a nearby mansion. Chu Luiyue quickly scanned his surroundings and knitted his brows. This heptagon alley looked normal, but it vaguely had a very strong suppression. If one looked closely, they could sense that it came from the mansion. Emperor Jiawen looked at Chu Ning. Open the door. Chu Ning immediately said, yes. But before he could do anything, the door was already opened from the inside. The slender Rongjin appeared in front of the crowd. Mother, you're here. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 372. Upon seeing that the person in front of her was actually Emperor Jiawen, Rongjin stopped talking and panic flashed across her eyes. Father. When Emperor Jiawen saw Rongjin, he first heaved a sigh of relief in his heart before endless anger overwhelmed him. He suppressed the anger in his heart and asked in a low voice, Zhenjin, why are you here? I. Faced with Emperor Jiawen's questioning, Rongjin actually stuttered and didn't say anything for a while. Chu Luiyue squinted his eyes and turned to look at Rongjin and Situ Xingqian, who had just helped the Empress down the carriage. Her Majesty Crown Prince, isn't the fourth princess here perfectly fine? Rongjin looked up and saw Rongjin standing at the door. His words were stuck in his throat and his face turned green and white. At the side, Situ Xingqian's expression also changed. Why is Rongjin here? Didn't Elder Lian Ning say that he personally saw Chu Luiyue being brought to the forest outside the imperial city by Si Meng? Since Si Meng died in Chu Luiyue's hands, Rongjin should have been hidden by her too. What's the situation now? Rongjin instinctively looked at the Empress. Mother, this... impossible. When the Empress saw Rongjin, her reaction was more intense than anyone else's. She actually broke free from Rongjin and staggered toward Rongjin. Impossible. Zhenjin isn't here. You must be a fake. Her voice was sharp and hoarse, which made people feel very uncomfortable when they heard it. In addition, her face was distorted from shock and fear, which made her look even uglier. Emperor Jiawen didn't hide the disgust in his eyes. Empress, not only did you lie to me, but you even don't want to acknowledge your own daughter. You've really disappointed me. No matter what, he had doted on Rongjin for more than 10 years, so he was very sure that the person in front of him was Rongjin. To prove her innocence, the Empress actually lied through her teeth. How crazy. Rongjin seemed to be frightened by the Empress as she nervously took a step back. Mother, what do you mean? I'm Zhenjin. You're not Zhenjin. Argue. The Empress glared at Rongjin. Although she was still denying it, her voice was getting softer and softer. This person was indeed Rongjin. A sense of despair gradually filled his heart. Tell me quickly. Was it Chu Luiyue who sent you here? It must be her, right? The Empress was on the verge of breaking down. She looked like a lunatic. Emperor Jiawen's eyes were cold. Rongjin, say it yourself. What the hell is going on? Rongjin was stunned by the scene before her. and it took her a while to recover her senses. Yes. It was Chu Liwei who brought me here. Emperor Zhou continued asking, when? Rongzhen quickly glanced at the Empress and lowered her eyes guiltily. Before Chu Liwei went to Taiyan Academy. Fourth Princess, you must be joking. How come I didn't know about this? Besides, if I really wanted to imprison you, why would I choose to imprison you here of all places? Chu Liwei scanned his surroundings. To be honest, this is my first time here. On the other hand, Her Majesty, I heard from the third prince that you come here quite frequently. What's wrong with me that I have to hide the fourth princess here? Rongzhen instantly panicked. It's you. You have a grudge against me, so it should be the fourth princess who has a grudge against me, right? To be honest, I've never been taken advantage of by you before, so why would I have a grudge against you? Chu Liwei spoke nonchalantly. Even though his words were unpleasant, everyone present knew that it was the truth. Rongzhen previously made things difficult for Chu Liwei at the palace banquet, but she ended up in an embarrassing state. Later on, her pearl of essence broke and she became a good-for-nothing. However, Chu Liwei transformed into a genius that everyone envied. He was even picked by Mu Qinghe and had the chance to go to the Tianling dynasty. If we're talking about jealousy, Rongzhen should be the one who can't stand Chu Liwei. Rongzhen was even more embarrassed. Rongjiu lightly said, Father, now you can believe that I'm telling the truth, right? Emperor Zhou's face was terrifyingly dark. Rongzhen, move aside. I want to see what secrets there are inside. If the Empress secretly comes here often, she can definitely find out something. Rongzhen bit her lips and hesitated for a while, but she refused to move. Father, there's nothing inside. You shouldn't come in. I said move aside. Hollered Emperor Zhou. Rongzhen was so frightened that she shuddered and her face turned pale. Eunuch Min tried his best to persuade her. Fourth Princess, please let me pass. Do you really think that you can stop His Majesty with just you? Things have already reached this stage, yet Rongzhen is still like this. Isn't she just making things difficult for herself? Rongzhen's eyes reddened as she looked at the Empress timidly. Emperor Zhou sneered. Why are you looking at her? Are my words not as important as the Empress's? Rongjin immediately went forward and anxiously said, Father, please don't misunderstand. Rongzhen didn't mean it that way. Emperor Zhou couldn't be bothered with him as he looked at the Empress deeply. Empress, now that things have reached this stage, are you going to follow me in or continue acting dumb here? The Empress whimpered and her tears kept falling, looking very pitiful. However, Emperor Zhou felt even more disgusted when he saw this. He lifted his foot and walked forward. Chu Ning immediately followed and said, This formation is special. Your Majesty, this barrier is a little special. I'm afraid it's not good to barge in. Why don't you let me break this barrier first? Emperor Zhou stood still. Okay. Force gathered in Chu Ning's palm, and a strong suppression gradually spread out. Then he raised his hand and a strong force suddenly flew out. Hong. The transparent barrier suffered a powerful impact and ripples began to form. The terrifying force spread in all directions. Rongzhen, who was standing inside the barrier, was caught off guard and was affected by the force. She moved back a few steps and almost fell to the ground. She finally steadied herself and anxiously turned around as if she was afraid of something. Just as Chu Ning was about to attack again, Rongzhen finally couldn't help but shout. Stop fighting. I'll just open the barrier. Rongzhen. When the Empress heard this, she seemed to be agitated as she immediately screamed. Rongzhen was shocked as she shrunk her shoulders. Father's already here. He'll know sooner or later. As she spoke, her hand trembled as she touched the barrier. Chu Liwei focused his gaze. There seemed to be something hidden in Rongzhen's palm. Buzz. With a buzz, the barrier suddenly opened from the middle. Emperor Zhou walked forward first. Mother! Rongjin gasped. The crowd turned around and saw that the Empress had suddenly fainted. Chu Liwei clicked his tongue. Isn't it a little too late to pretend to faint now? Emperor Zhou didn't seem to care as he walked straight in. Chu Liwei and Chu Ning followed closely behind. When they saw the scene in the courtyard clearly, even Chu Liwei couldn't help but gasp. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 373. The courtyard was empty and only a skeleton was hanging in the middle. From the tattered clothes, it seemed to be a young man, but his body was almost completely corroded, and one couldn't see his original appearance. The most serious injury on his entire body was his face. It was as if someone had harshly slashed his face with an axe. His face was a mess of flesh and blood, and one couldn't even distinguish his features, let alone recognize who he was. Below the corpse was a bronze cauldron. The edges of the bronze cauldron were stained with dried blood. The pungent smell of blood spread from within. It was disgusting. However, this wasn't the scariest thing. This was because there were a few skeletons on the ground around the corpse. With one look, one could tell that they were human skeletons. Unlike the hanging corpses, only white bones were left on the ground, and they looked like they had been dead for a long time. This scene caused the hearts and minds of the people who walked in to be shaken. The place fell into dead silence and the space seemed to have frozen. After some time, Emperor Zhou recovered his senses and suddenly hollered, "Bring the Empress over." The Emperor was enraged. Even Rongjin, who was previously protecting the Empress, couldn't take it as he stiffly carried the Empress over. The Empress's eyes were still tightly shut as if she had completely fainted. Emperor Zhou stared at the skeletons and the veins on his forehead popped out. "Beat her. If the Empress still doesn't wake up, continue to beat her." The crowd was stunned. Emperor Zhou actually ordered people to beat the Empress? He was really mad. How could Rongjin bear to do this? He also couldn't watch others beat up his mother. He hurriedly blocked the Empress and knelt down. "Father, the truth hasn't been found yet. If you treat mother like this, you'll hurt her." Emperor Zhou hurriedly walked forward and harshly kicked Rongjin's shoulder. "Get lost." Rongjin didn't dare to resist and was directly kicked to the side. Emperor Zhou raised his hand and was about to slap the Empress. Xianxia stood at the side. Even though she didn't want to be involved, she had no choice. Seeing that Emperor Zhou had already lifted the Empress up, Xianxia finally spoke. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. The Crown Prince was right. Nothing was clear yet. Why not wait until everything was clear before making a decision? At that time, if the Empress is really guilty, it won't be too late for you to punish her personally." Emperor Zhou paused in his actions. At this moment, the Empress who had fainted suddenly woke up. She slowly opened her eyes and was dazed when she saw Emperor Zhou's face right in front of her. "Your Majesty." Then she seemed to have just realized that Emperor Zhou was grabbing her collar, and her face was filled with shock and panic. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Emperor Zhou sneered and directly pushed her to the ground. "Don't you know what good things you've done? You'd better tell me clearly what's going on." The Empress knelt on the ground, weeping and complaining about her ignorance. "I know. I really don't know." Emperor Zhou looked at Rongjin. "Rongjin, tell me." Rongjin timidly took a step back and her lips trembled. "Your Majesty, there's something strange about this bronze cauldron." Chuning walked to the bronze cauldron and carefully inspected it with a solemn expression. "This thing seems to be able to swallow a person's force." Upon hearing this, Chu Liyue couldn't help but walk over. Once she got close, she felt a sinister aura seeping out from the bronze cauldron. The next moment, that aura enveloped her. It's dangerous." Upon seeing this, Chuning immediately wanted to pull Chu Liyue away. However, Chu Liyue shook her head and signaled for him to wait for a while. Then she felt that the force in her body started to stir under the aura's envelopment. She looked at the bronze cauldron. Black and red mixed together, and that aura suddenly became stronger. She knitted her brows. "This aura actually wants to forcefully strip my force from my body." She backed away without hesitation. After leaving the bronze cauldron, that aura quickly disappeared as if it had never appeared. However, Chu Liyue felt a chill in his heart. Just now, she had been greatly affected just by standing at the side, let alone the person who was hanging above the bronze vat. Furthermore, that person's body was riddled with wounds and stained with blood. It was obvious that he had suffered many wounds when he was alive. When his blood dripped onto the wounds, his origin power was naturally harvested even more cleanly. Chu Liyue was almost certain that that person's origin power had been continuously devoured, and finally died from exhaustion. No, it wasn't just that person. The bones around him should be the same. Chuning pulled Chu Liyue over and heaved a sigh of relief after confirming that she was fine. This bronze cauldron is an item of great evil and great een. You must not go near it. Emperor Zhou frowned. Chuning, what did you say about the bronze cauldron? Chuning explained once more. Therefore, this bronze cauldron must have been deliberately placed here by someone to devour the power of other cultivators. As expected, after hearing this, Emperor Zhou didn't look shocked at all. Instead, he seemed to have confirmed something. I've once heard of something similar in the royal family's secret history. As long as one gathers enough energy, this bronze cauldron can be upgraded to a higher grade yuan instrument. Whoever becomes its owner will be able to obtain all the energy it contains and greatly increase their cultivation level. Emperor Zhou's words made everyone's hair stand on end. Such a method could be said to be extremely vicious and cruel. And the only person who knows about this. Other than me, only the Empress knows about this. Emperor Zhou's sentence was like a bolt of lightning that struck them. Everyone looked at the Empress. Chu Liyue suddenly understood. No wonder Emperor Zhou's attitude toward the Empress became even worse when he came in and saw the bronze cauldron. It turns out that he had already determined that the Empress did all of this back then. Si Huijing. I didn't expect you to do such a thing in secret. You're really vicious. Once Emperor Zhou thought of how he had actually shared a bed with such a woman for so many years, he felt goosebumps all over his body, and he was so disgusted that he wanted to vomit. The Empress's face was dejected and she couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. Rongjin also panicked and couldn't help but argue. Father, even if Mother knows about it, it can't prove that she did it. Mother is already the Empress. What benefits does she have by doing this? Yeah, Her Majesty is already the mother of the country. Why isn't she satisfied? Rongjio suddenly spoke up as he looked down at the mother-son duo, and his eyes were filled with obscurity. Of course, she didn't do this for herself. She did it for the honorable crown prince, brother. Rongjin was shocked. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 374. Rongjio. Don't spout nonsense. Rongjin instinctively wanted to retort. I'm the crown prince and I'm considered one of the top cultivators. Why do I have to resort to such means? All these years, I've always relied on my own abilities to cultivate, and I've never taken any shortcuts. I've also never used such sinister means. I can swear on my life. Rongjin also swore. He was very clear that in this situation he would be doomed if he didn't quickly extricate himself and his mother from this matter. However, his words seemed very weak in comparison to the Empress's reaction. Si Huijing, what are your intentions for doing this? Emperor Zhou didn't listen to Rongjin at all. He had already confirmed that the Empress did all of this. The tears on the Empress's face had already dried, and only despair was left. Emperor Zhou glanced at Rongjin and Rongjun and sneered. You don't want to say? That's good too. Rongjin and Rongjun can't escape the blame either. And Rongqi. I must have been blind back then to choose you as the Empress. I even made Rongjin the crown prince. Tuning. Rongjio. Immediately search the entire place. Yes. The duo didn't hesitate at all as they answered in unison. Then they split up and started searching in different directions. Rongjun wanted to say something but didn't. It seemed like she wanted to stop them, but she just stood there anxiously in the end. Eunuch Min stood behind Emperor Zhou, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. As it involved the Empress and the rest, this trip was very low-key and they didn't even bring any guards. They didn't expect such a shocking secret to be exposed. Chu Liyue looked at the messy scene in front of him and raised his brows slightly as he looked up at the sky. Country Yao Chen's sky is finally going to change. When the Empress heard Emperor Zhou's words, she finally realized something. Emperor Zhou is planning to punish both her and her son. It's fine if something happens to me, but Rongjin's position as the crown prince can't be snatched away. Seeing that Chu Ning and Rongjio had already started searching inside, she shivered and directly kowtowed to Emperor Zhou to admit her guilt. Your Majesty, please forgive me. I know my mistake. You can punish me however you want, but please let my children off. They're all innocent. They didn't know anything about this. She smashed her head on the ground with all her might. With a dull thud, her forehead was soon bleeding profusely. Her makeup had long been ruined by her tears. Coupled with the bright red and sticky blood slowly flowing down from her forehead, she looked even more miserable. Emperor Zhou was unmoved as if he had heard a joke. You don't know? Rongzhen is right here and you're telling me that she doesn't know anything? The queen was speechless. In actual fact, she didn't know why Rongzhen was here either. She did this very secretly, so Rongjin and the rest didn't know about it, including Rongzhen. Even if she was crazy, she wouldn't send Rongzhen here. But Rongzhen was indeed here. There was no room for argument. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt hatred toward Rongzhen. If it weren't for her, why would Emperor Zhou find this place? Then he wouldn't have seen everything here. They also wouldn't suspect Rongjin and the rest because of her existence. She looked at Rongzhen and pleaded. Xinzhen, tell your imperial father yourself how you came to be here, okay? Take it that I'm begging you. You don't want your big brother and second brother to suffer with you, right? You can't drag them down with you. Rongzhen's eyes trembled. Many scenes suddenly appeared in her mind. How familiar was this scene? Ever since I was young, Imperial Mother would say something like this every time I met with something, right? Her eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of fog. Then she lowered her head slightly and said clearly, word by word, "You're right. Imperial Father, it was Imperial Mother who sent me here." The queen's voice suddenly stopped and she looked at Rongzhen in disbelief. Mother said that this was the only way to help me take revenge for Chu Liyue. Also, she could pin Elder Si Meng's death on them. Every word Rongzhen said made the queen's eyes widen. After hearing this, she was completely dazed. Soon after, the Empress suddenly realized something and screamed, "You're wrong. Your Majesty. Everything she said is fake. It's all fake. Don't believe her." Emperor Zhou glanced at her and nonchalantly said, "You're saying that your biological daughter is framing you?" The queen felt very aggrieved, but she didn't know what to say. She also didn't know why Rongzhen would say this. Emperor Zhou stepped forward and asked, "Rongzhen, did you just say that Si Meng died in your mother's hands?" Rongzhen shuddered and lightly pointed at the bronze vat before quickly retracting her hand as if she were afraid of something. However, this action was clear enough. She was clearly saying that Si Meng had already died in the bronze vat. I almost forgot that he's a stage 5 warrior. Taking away such a strong warrior's strength is naturally twice the result with half the effort. Chu Liyue silently sized Rongzhen up. I only left for 10 days, so why did so many things happen in the imperial city? If I didn't clearly remember that I killed Si Meng, I would have really believed Rongzhen's previous words. The queen's face flushed red and white and she was about to argue. Your Majesty. Father. Chu Ning and Rongjio came back one after another. The duo's expressions were strange. Emperor Zhou's heart sank. What's the matter? Chu Ning and Rongjio looked at each other and seemed hesitant. After a moment, Chu Ning cupped his fists. Your Majesty, there are many skeletons buried in the backyard. Rongjio hurriedly added. There are more or less some scattered bones hidden in the various rooms in this yard. Roughly looking, there are about 100 people. Dead silence. Even Chu Liyue couldn't help but frown. When she saw the bronze vat, she thought that there must be more than just a few skeletons here. However, she didn't expect there to be so many. Most of those people are cultivators. There haven't been any missing persons cases in the imperial city all these years, so these people should have been brought in from outside the imperial city," said Chu Ning solemnly. Emperor Zhou took a deep breath in and stared at the queen. "Si Huijing, you can't do all of this by yourself. Tell me who's helping you. The Si family?" Hearing Emperor Zhou mention the Si family, the queen immediately shook her head out of reflex. "No. I did all of this by myself. I was blinded for a moment. I'm willing to use my death to atone for my sins. I only beg your Majesty to let Rongjin, Rongqi and the Si family off." Rongjin finally couldn't help but say, "Mother, what are you doing? You didn't do this, right? Who's the one harming you? Just say it, Pack." The queen actually slapped Rongjin harshly. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 375. Rongjin was stunned by the slap. The Empress's slap was very harsh, and it directly caused half of Rongjin's face to swell up. Her palm was slightly numb, and her heart trembled when she saw Rongjin's dazed and hurt expression. "If I wasn't forced, why would I bear to hit my most beloved son? But, you don't have the right to speak. hollered the Empress. Then she broke free from Rongjin, knelt forward and begged. Your Majesty, I won't complain no matter how you punish me. But I'm the only one who did all this. Emperor Zhaowen's eyes were filled with mockery. Didn't you deny it previously? Why are you admitting it so readily now? You just won't cry until you see the coffin and won't turn back until you hit the wall. Seeing that all the evidence was in front of her and that she couldn't argue, she finally admitted it. Moreover, he actually wanted to take full responsibility and put all the blame on himself. Your cultivation talent is average, so this bronze cauldron definitely wasn't prepared for you, right? How many people in this world can make you spend so much effort on it? As he spoke, Emperor Zhaowen's gaze landed on Rongjin. Rongjin shuddered. He didn't know why, but he also felt guilty. He wasn't stupid. When he found out about the bronze cauldron's use, he had already noticed something. After seeing the Empress's reaction, it would be a joke if he still couldn't guess who it was prepared for. Even if he didn't know anything about it before, he still shuddered when he thought about how hundreds of cultivators' skeletons were hidden in this yard. The Empress choked and couldn't say anything. Emperor Zhaowen closed his eyes. Bring the Empress and Rongjin back to the palace. Without my permission, they're not allowed to leave the palace. As for Rongjin, go back to Crown Prince Mansion. Right. And Rongqi, tell him to stay in King Ping's residence. When this matter is completely investigated, I'll punish them one by one. Then Emperor Zhaowen angrily waved his sleeves and turned to leave. Eunuch Min hurriedly followed him and didn't dare to say anything. Chu Ning heaved a sigh of relief and patted Chu Liyue's arm. Oh, go back and have a good rest. Now this matter had completely nothing to do with him and his daughter. However, as the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Guards, he still had to follow His Majesty to continue investigating. Chu Liyue gently nodded. Father, don't worry. Yi can take good care of herself. Only then was Chu Ning at ease. He turned around and walked to Rongjin. Fourth princess, please. Rongjin looked at the Empress hesitantly. Mother, scram. This consort doesn't have a daughter like you. The Empress suddenly cursed. Rongjin's already pale face turned even paler. Her lips moved, but in the end she said nothing and turned to leave. When she passed by Chu Liyue, her head was still lowered as if she did not notice Chu Liyue's existence. Fourth princess. Chu Liyue suddenly called out to her. Rongjin then stopped abruptly and looked up at her. Upon seeing Chu Liyue, Rongjin instinctively knitted her brows and revealed a look of disgust. However, just as she was about to speak, fear flashed across her heart for some reason. Inexplicably, she swallowed back the words in her throat. Faced with her series of subtle reactions, Chu Liyue's eyes flashed, and he vaguely had a guess in his heart. She did not say anything else and gave Chu Ning a reassuring smile. However, Rongjin was scared and quickly left. On the other side, Rongjio stood in front of the Empress and Rongjin, quietly waiting for the two of them. He seemed to be very patient and did not say much as he stood at the side and waited. From time to time he even glanced at the two of them as if he was having fun. Nobody knew that he had been waiting for this day for too long. Now that he could finally see the Empress in such a pathetic state, he naturally had to seize the opportunity. Rongjin noticed his gaze, and it was as if the fire in his heart had been ignited. Rongjio, you did it on purpose, didn't you? You just wanted to make a joke out of us. Are you satisfied now? Rongjio lightly said. Imperial brother, what are you talking about? I'm just waiting to send the two of you back. Father has already given the order, so I naturally have to follow it. Rongjin clenched his fists tightly. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. Isn't it because of your lowly birth, mother? You have been harboring hatred for us for more than a day or two. One day I'll definitely make you pay back double. Rongjio's gaze turned cold and intense murderous intent spread. Crown Prince, if you have the time, you should think about how to get out of this hopeless situation. The Empress's position can't be kept and Rongjin isn't any better. This time it will even implicate the Xi family. You can't even protect yourself, yet you still want to take revenge? What a joke. Rongjin almost shattered his molars before he finally suppressed the hatred in his heart. Mother, let's go. They had to think of another way. Rongjin supported the Empress and walked in front. Rongjio paused and looked at Situ Xingqian. Eldest Princess Situ, are you coming along or... Situ Xingqian's face was like a frozen mask and it was awkward and terrible. She didn't expect things to develop to such a stage. Wasn't everything fine before? Why did the Empress and Crown Princess situation become so precarious after I left the palace? What should I do? I won't follow you, Situ Xianxia said with difficulty. Situ Xianxia forced herself to say this, but it was too late for regrets. If I knew this would happen, I definitely wouldn't have set a marriage agreement with Rongjin. This situation can't be salvaged. This isn't very good, right? Eldest Princess Situ, you just got engaged to the Crown Prince. Now that the Crown Prince is in trouble, isn't it equivalent to running away? Not only the Crown Prince, but many people will be very disappointed, right? Chu Liwei crossed her arms and lazily said. Situ Xianxia glanced at her and hatred quickly flashed across her eyes. Chu Liwei is clearly doing this on purpose. I'd better not. After all, this matter is very serious. Even though I'm engaged to the Crown Prince, I'm still considered an outsider. As country Xing Luo's eldest princess, it's really not appropriate for me to continue being involved in this matter. At this point, Situ Xianxia was still very particular with her words as she easily separated herself from this matter. It was as if she had forgotten that it was because she testified that she once saw Chu Luiyue and Rongjin together that she incited the Empress and Rongjin to criticize Chu Luiyue in front of Emperor Zhou. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Eldest Princess Situ, you're right. However, I originally thought that you and the Crown Prince must be in love with each other since you got engaged so quickly. When you saw that he was in trouble, you would definitely step forward. Seems like I'm thinking too much. Situ Xianxia's expression became even more awkward. Rongjin, who was walking in front, suddenly reacted as he turned around and rushed to Situ Xianxia, grabbing her hand. Yes, Xianxia, you're the only one who can help me now. Go and ask your father to step forward. He'll definitely let you off. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 376. Situ Xianxia flung Rongjin's hand away without hesitation. Rongjin was shocked. Xianxia. Wasn't she smiling at me with gentle eyes previously? Why did she suddenly become so cold in the blink of an eye? He even saw a flash of disgust in her eyes. Situ Xianxia hid her smile and gently said, Prince, don't misunderstand. Your Highness, please don't misunderstand. It's not that I don't want to help. It's just that this matter is of great importance. His Majesty might not be willing to let others know about it. If I rashly ask for father's help, it might make His Majesty even angrier. Upon hearing this, Rongjin also hesitated. Situ Xianxia's words made sense. Now, Imperial Father seemed to have determined that this matter was done by Imperial Mother. In the future it was very likely that they would be held accountable and even the Xi family might not be spared. This isn't just a family scandal. If this news gets out, the entire country Yao Chen's royal family's reputation will be destroyed completely. But other than this, he really couldn't think of any other solution. Then what should we do? Rongjin had never seen Emperor Zhou so angry. Xianxia, you must think of a way to help me. We're already engaged now. If anything happens to me and mother. Situ Xianxia's intestines were about to turn green with regret. If I knew that things would turn out like this, I wouldn't have replied to Rongjin's letter no matter what. She pretended to think for a while and said, Prince, don't worry. This matter hasn't been settled yet. This matter had not been settled yet, so there was still room for negotiation. Why don't I go back to Xing Luo first and discuss with father before we see how to solve this? I must leave this troublesome place as soon as possible. Once I go back, I'll immediately tell father to cancel my engagement with Rongjin. Rongjin didn't know what Situ Xianxia was thinking and only thought that she agreed to ask her father for help. Hence, he was very grateful, and even the unhappiness and suspicion he felt when she flung his hand away disappeared completely. Then you must be quick. I'll wait for your news, said Rongjin, and his expression changed slightly. Xianxia, only you're willing to help me. Situ Xianxia suppressed the disgust in her heart and smiled as she urged him. Rest assured, Your Highness. Her Majesty the Empress is still waiting for you over there. Hurry up and go. What happened today must have had a great impact on her. You must take good care of her. Warmth flooded Rongjin's heart as he looked at Situ Xianxia gratefully. He had never felt that she was so moving before. He couldn't suppress the impulse in his heart and suddenly pulled Situ Xianxia into his embrace. Xianxia was shocked by his actions and almost wanted to hit him. I promise you once this is over we'll get married. Rongjin enunciated every word clearly. Xianxia's body froze. If it weren't for the people watching at the side, she would have long pushed Rongjin away. She closed her eyes and suppressed her anger. Your Highness, now is not the time to talk about this. Let's deal with the Empress first. Upon hearing this, Rongjin finally let go of her and looked at her intently. Then, everything depends on you. Then Rongjin turned around and left. Xianxia felt as if ants were crawling all over her body, and she almost screamed out loud. After waiting for those people's figures to disappear with much difficulty, she hurriedly said to Rongjio, "Third Prince, I'm sorry. I don't want to disturb His Majesty anymore, so I'll take my leave." After saying that, he walked out. Rongjio raised his voice. "Eldest Princess Situ, isn't this a bit too rude? Why don't I send someone to send you back?" Xianxia acted as if she didn't hear anything as she hurriedly left. Very quickly, only Chu Liyue and Rongjio were left in the yard. Chu Liyue bowed to Rongjio. "Thank you, Your Highness. If it weren't for Rongjio's interference, Chu Ning definitely wouldn't have been able to avoid punishment, and the heptagon wouldn't have appeared." However, Rongjio looked at Chu Liyue in deep thought. "You don't have to thank me. We just have our own needs." Then he lifted his feet and left. Chu Liyue raised his brows. "Previously I didn't realize that Rongjio is quite interesting. At the very least he's honest enough. But, judging from his previous reaction, he didn't seem to know what was going on here." Her eyes sparkled. "Previously I didn't hide Rongjin here, but she appeared here for no reason these 2 days and was coincidentally seen by Rongjio. The most important thing is that Rongjin's memory is in a mess. She clearly doesn't remember everything that happened in the forest outside the Imperial City and remembers that the Empress sent her here. Also Simeng. He clearly died in front of me, but I've completely remembered it wrong. If it weren't for Rongjin's words, Emperor Zhou definitely wouldn't have confirmed the Empress's guilt so easily. In the entire Imperial City, there should only be one person who can do this. Rongjio." Chu Liyue lightly pouted. "Yesterday I stayed at Rongjio's place for quite a long time, but Rongjio didn't even mention this matter. Who would have thought that all of this was controlled by Rongjio, who never showed himself, from the start to the end?" Even Rongjin sighed when she recalled the series of developments. "Rongjio's schemes are really deeper than I thought. However, this feeling of having someone to deal with the aftermath and devising strategies to solve all problems seems pretty good." Chu Liyue's lips curved up, and she turned around to look at the bronze cauldron as she fell into deep thought. What exactly does the Empress want to do with this thing? Does she really just want to help Rongjin raise his cultivation level? But even if Rongjin relies on himself to cultivate, there shouldn't be much of a problem. If more than 100 people died here, it means that the Empress has been doing this since a long time ago. What exactly is she doing? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Chu Liyue's mind. Previously, Rongjin mentioned a secret about Rongjin. Could it be related to that? Xi family. In the martial arts arena, the Xi family's younger generation was diligently cultivating. Xi stood below the arena and gave them pointers from time to time. One of the biggest reasons why the Xi family could become the leader of the 4 big families was that the Xi family had plenty of fresh blood. These young men and women in their teens and 20s were all very outstanding. Compared to the other families, the Xi family was especially outstanding in this aspect. Even though they couldn't compare to Xi Ting, Xi was already very satisfied. Suddenly, a guard rushed in from outside with a hurried expression. "Family head. His Majesty is urgently summoning you." Xi was dazed. Why would His Majesty suddenly summon me to the palace at this time? Do you know what's going on? The guard shook his head, but his expression was a little nervous. Eunuch Min is waiting outside. He seems to be quite anxious. Xi knitted his brows. Seeing the guard's reaction, it doesn't seem to be as simple as anxious. He said in a low voice. "Got it. I'll go now." Digression. I slept at 3 p.m. was disturbed by a mosquito for more than an hour in the morning, and my period came to visit. I broke my phone. Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 377. Xi walked out and happened to see Xi Ting return. "Greetings, Master." Si Ting cupped his fists and bowed. His chiseled face was a little tense. Si Yi saw his expression and found it strange. Si Ting, shouldn't you be at the academy today? Why are you back now? Si Ting hesitated for a moment. I heard that something happened in the palace. What happened? Why didn't I know? Si Yi was even more confused. He had been sending people to contact the palace. Something really happened, he should be the first to know. How did Si Ting know that he was at Tianlu Academy? Also, it doesn't look good. Si Ting looked at him and clenched his fists. Chu Luiwei didn't go to the academy today. He was summoned to the palace. So what? Si Yi realized something the moment he spoke and his expression changed. You're saying that it has something to do with the fourth princess? Si Ting nodded. I felt that something was amiss, so I came back to take a look. I saw Eunuch Min standing at the door. Si Ting pursed his lips. Eunuch Min's expression wasn't good. At least he had never seen such an expression on Eunuch Min's face after meeting him so many times. Also, this was clearly directed at the Si family. Si Ye's heart gradually sank. Since the fourth princess was involved, His Majesty must have found out that they were secretly searching for Rongzhen. Si Meng might have been exposed as well. He hurriedly patted Si Ting's shoulder. I'll go to the palace to take a look first. You stay at home. If anything happens, you'll be in charge of everything in the Si family. As he spoke, he took out a token and stuffed it into Si Ting's hands. Si Ting frowned. What had happened to make the patriarch so nervous? He even gave me the token that represents the Si family's master? Master, I can't take this. You should take it. Si Ye's expression was very stern and he didn't allow any rejection. Si Ting exchanged glances with him and suddenly realized that the current situation might be more troublesome and dangerous than he had imagined. He finally held the token tightly and nodded. Don't worry. I'll protect the Si family. Only then did Si Yi feel more at ease. He took a long look at Si Ting before turning to leave. Si Ting looked at his back. For some reason, the uneasiness in his heart started to spread. On the other side, Si Yi followed Eunuch Min into the palace in a hurry. Along the way, he had tried several times to find out what was going on, but Eunuch Min was very tight-lipped and refused to divulge any information. This made Si Yi even more certain of his guess. Something must have happened to the Empress. Otherwise, Eunuch Min would not have such an attitude. The two of them were silent the entire way. By the time they reached the Imperial study, countless thoughts had already flashed through Si Ye's mind. Si Yi looked around without batting an eyelid. He immediately realized that the guards in the Imperial study were much stricter than before. The overall atmosphere was also more solemn and dignified than before. His heart felt like it was hanging in the air and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Eunuch Min stepped forward alone and said respectfully, Your Majesty, Master Si has arrived. Emperor Zhouan's cold voice came from the Imperial study. Let him in. Eunuch Min looked at Si Yi and took a step back. Master Si, this way please. Si Yi took a deep breath in and tidied his clothes before walking forward and pushing the door open to enter. Once he walked in and saw the scene inside, Si Ye's heart harshly skipped a beat. In the spacious and quiet Imperial study, Emperor Zhouan was sitting behind the table. The booklets, brushes and ink on the table were all swept to the floor and it was a mess. The Empress, Si Huijing, was kneeling in front of him. Her extravagant palace gown was filled with dirt, and her usually neatly combed hair was also very messy. Her face was tear-stained and her eyes were red and swollen. She knelt there and her entire body was filled with despair and pain. Si Yi had never seen her in such a pathetic state. Her Majesty? He couldn't help but shout as he hurriedly walked forward. But very quickly he realized that Emperor Zhouan was still in the study. He hurriedly stopped in his tracks, turned around and looked at Emperor Zhouan. He suppressed the waves in his heart and bowed. Si Yi greets Your Majesty. When the Empress saw him, her dazed eyes moved and her expression was very strange. It was as if she wanted to cry, but she couldn't cry anymore. She had cried for half her life and she had almost cried dry today. However, this didn't make Emperor Zhouan's heart soften at all. Emperor Zhouan looked at Si Yi with a heavy gaze. Si Yi, do you know why I called you over? Si Yi only felt a strong pressure coming over him. He knelt down almost without thinking. I don't know. Please enlighten me, Your Majesty. You don't know? Don't you know that the Si family was secretly searching for Rongzhen's whereabouts? Emperor Zhou's voice was like a heavy hammer that harshly slammed down. Siyi clenched his fists tightly. As expected. His Majesty already knows. He immediately placed his hands on the floor and heavily knocked his forehead on the floor. I know my mistake. Please punish me, Your Majesty. You know your mistake? To think that I thought you were loyal to me. I didn't expect you to secretly work with the Empress and lie to me for so many years. You already knew about Si Meng's matter, right? You're really something. The more Emperor Zhou spoke, the angrier he got. He actually picked up the remaining teacup beside him and suddenly threw it at Siyi. Bang! The teacup harshly landed in front of Siyi. The shards flew everywhere and two of them quickly scratched Siyi's face, leaving bloody marks. However, Siyi didn't dare to move as he knelt even more respectfully. Your Majesty, I know my mistake, but all of this has nothing to do with Her Majesty. Back then I was worried that Her Majesty couldn't protect herself in the palace, so I specially arranged for Si Meng. Also, regarding the fourth princess's disappearance. Her Majesty was afraid that you'd be too worried, so she wanted me to help. She didn't hide it on purpose. No matter what, I'm willing to bear all the consequences. Upon hearing this, Emperor Zhou sneered. Bear all the consequences? Do you have the right? Siyi, you don't have to act in front of me. Rongzhen didn't even go missing. She was hidden by the Empress. Siyi was shocked and suddenly looked up. What? Upon seeing his reaction, Emperor Zhou squinted his eyes. What? Your good sister didn't tell you? Siyi's heart was in a mess and he subconsciously looked at the Empress. Empress, what's going on? The Empress lowered her head. She knew that it was useless to say anything now. Rongzhen happened to appear at Heptagon Alley at that time, and she even said those words herself. Emperor Zhou had already confirmed everything. She spoke in a hoarse voice. Your Majesty, my brother really knows nothing about this. Please let the Si family off. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 378. Siyi was confused as he listened at the side. Rongzhen didn't go missing. She was hidden by the Empress? But she didn't look like that at all. Besides, if she really wanted to do this, why would Si Meng die for no reason? He endured the pain and couldn't be bothered to wipe the blood off his face as he hurriedly begged. Your Majesty, even though I don't know who told you all this, it must be fake. Previously, the fourth princess and Si Meng went missing together, and Si Meng died very quickly. The Empress was worried about the fourth princess's safety, so she found me. I secretly sent people to search the entire imperial city, but they didn't find any traces of the fourth princess. Rongzhen said all this herself. Could she be lying? Emperor Zhou's cold words made Siyi swallow his remaining words. He widened his eyes in shock and couldn't recover his senses for a long time. Rongzhen said it herself? Could it be that Rongzhen has been found? Looking at Siyi's expression, Emperor Zhou thought to himself, he really doesn't seem to know about this. Otherwise his acting skills are too good. Siyi had followed him for many years, so he more or less understood him. If Siyi was really involved in this matter, he definitely wouldn't have such a reaction. Emperor Zhou's mood finally calmed down a little. As the head of the Si family, the head of the four major families, Siyi's identity was very important. Unless it was a critical moment, Emperor Zhou wasn't willing to touch him. If not, the entire imperial city would be shaken. That was also the reason why he chose to deal with such a major matter in such a low-key manner. Siyi, the Empress has already admitted that she killed Si Meng and sent Rongzhen to Heptagon Alley to frame the Chu family. Do you have anything to say about this? Siyi was dazed. The Empress killed Si Meng? How is this possible? All these years the Empress trusted and relied on Si Meng a lot. What good does it do to kill him? Besides, why did she send Rongzhen to Heptagon Alley? Hasn't that place been abandoned for many years? Faced with Emperor Zhou's stern questioning, Siyi's heart thumped, and he couldn't help but look at the Empress at the side. Empress, is what His Majesty said true? The Empress's face didn't change at all. She just nodded stiffly. She only hoped that the Si family wouldn't be implicated, so even if she wasn't the one who did it, she had to admit it. Moreover, with the bronze cauldron in Heptagon Alley, these matters were nothing. I'm afraid that Emperor Zhou has already cut me into pieces in his heart. Siyi was shocked. he asked almost subconsciously. Why? The Empress lowered her eyes, seemingly not intending to continue speaking. Emperor Zhou chided her. Why aren't you saying anything? If you can do it, why can't you say it now? Tell Xianxia what good things you did in Heptagon Alley. Xianxia had never seen Emperor Zhou so angry before, and he couldn't help but be shocked. Previously, when Si Meng and Rongzhen were mentioned, Emperor Zhou had been holding it in. Why did he suddenly have such a huge reaction when Heptagon Alley was mentioned? It seems like the Heptagon Alley incident is more intolerable to Emperor Zhou than Si Meng's existence and hiding Rongzhen. The Empress's pale and cracked lips trembled. Your Majesty, I did all these myself, and it has nothing to do with my brother or the entire Si family. If this matter continues, it will only become more troublesome. Please give me a swift end and end it. Emperor Zhou chuckled. Now you know how troublesome it is. When you did it back then, did you think that this day would come? It's not impossible for you to end it. You just have to make it clear whether the bronze cauldron was prepared for Rongjin or not. And why are you doing this? Xianxia was confused when he heard this. What bronze cauldron? Why is Rongjin involved in this? The Empress bit her lips tightly. Actually, Emperor Zhou had asked her this question many times. However, she never admitted it. She knew better than anyone else how much Emperor Zhou hated the bronze cauldron. Hence, once I admit it, Rongjin will never be able to make a comeback. Thinking of this, her heart was completely drowned in despair. The next moment she suddenly slammed against the wall at the side. Emperor Zhou stood up angrily. Stop her. Xianxia had long rushed over when the Empress moved and blocked in front of her. The Empress harshly slammed her head into Xianxia's arms. Dong. Xianxia let out a muffled groan as a sweet and fishy taste surged into his mouth. The Empress actually really wants to kill me. She used all her strength this time. Jing, what are you doing? Xianxia was angry and anxious as he directly shouted the Empress's name. The Empress grabbed his hand and anxiously begged. Brother, kill me. Quickly kill me. As long as she died, everything would be over. But how could Xianxia bear to do it? What exactly happened to you? Emperor Zhou looked on coldly at the side. Empress, do you think I can't do anything to you if you don't say anything? Then he suddenly raised his voice and shouted. Guards, bring me a brush and ink. He had smashed most of the things on the table and they couldn't be used anymore. However, the Imperial study didn't lack these things at all. Eunuch Min hurriedly came in from outside as if he didn't see the disheveled Xianxia and the Empress on the ground. He silently walked to the other side, took out a new brush and presented it to Emperor Zhou. Then he very consciously started to grind the ink. Emperor Zhou picked up the brush and nonchalantly glanced at the Empress. I think you can't continue to be the Empress. As for Rongjin, with a mother like you, what kind of son can he teach? He can't take on such a big responsibility. I should have removed him long ago. The Empress suddenly realized that Emperor Zhou didn't just want to remove the Empress. He also wanted to remove the Crown Prince. In her panic, she couldn't help but scream. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Rongjin just got engaged with Xianxia. If you remove the Crown Prince now, how are you going to explain to country Xingluo? Emperor Zhou paused in his actions and sneered. No wonder they're so fearless. They actually thought of how to get away with it right from the start. It turns out that Rongjin successfully fought for the marriage agreement with Xianxia just for this day. Emperor Zhou hated himself for being blind for so many years. He actually let such a vicious mother and son lie to him for so long. I do want to see if country Xingluo will continue to maintain the marriage agreement between Xianxia and Rongjin after knowing about this. Country Xingluo. Xianxia returned to the palace at the fastest speed possible and recounted everything that had happened in detail. However, country Xingluo's Emperor Xiankong Yen kept quiet for a long time before shaking his head. Xingqian, this marriage agreement can't be cancelled. Digression. I forgot how to address the Emperor of country Xingluo and his name. Using this chapter as the basis, I'll change the previous chapters together. It was hard to believe that in the early summer when mosquitoes appeared, I used 4 heating pads in one day. Mobile users, please browse and read, a better reading experience from love. Chapter 379. Your Highness, this move is really ingenious. Chu Luiyue looked at the chessboard in front of her, but the black chess piece in her hand didn't move. Almost all my black chess pieces are blocked. Rong Xiu sat opposite her quietly. Upon hearing this, his thin red lips curved up slightly. You clearly have another path to take, right? Chu Luiyue could obviously tell. But, even if I take this step and barely break out of my current predicament, Your Highness, didn't you already prepare an inescapable trap? Since I'm going to lose anyway, there's no point in taking this extra step. Chu Luiyue threw the chess piece back into the chess pot and raised her hands. I admit defeat. Looking at her obedient manner, Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. You're not focused. What are you thinking about? As he spoke, he started to put away the chess pieces. Chu Luiyue looked at his slow movements and couldn't help but wrinkle her nose. Actually, even if she was focused, she would barely be able to fight Rong Xiu to a draw. If they really wanted to compare, Rong Xiu was indeed better. Rong Xiu slowly said, "This move seems to be very simple. This step may seem meaningless, but there will be people who will take it." Chu Luiyue snorted. It's just a waste of effort. Not only did Situ Yan not cancel Rong Jin and Situ Xingqian's marriage agreement, but he even took the initiative to ask for mercy. Even if His Majesty was furious and couldn't wait to punish the Empress and Crown Prince, he had to give Situ Yan some face. Chu Luiyue had long expected that Situ Yan wouldn't cancel the marriage agreement easily, but she didn't expect him to help so decisively. It could be seen that Situ Yan thought highly of Rong Jin. Rong Xiu smiled lightly. If the problem could be solved so easily, it wouldn't have dragged until today. Chu Luiyue suddenly leaned forward, placed her hands on the chessboard and stared at Rong Xiu. Your Highness, did you already know that Situ Yan would help? Rong Xiu raised his eyes slightly and glanced at Chu Luiyue's face with a faint smile. Didn't you already know? Between the two of them, there seemed to be some kind of ambiguous air flowing slowly. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu thoughtfully. Of course she knew. However, the reason why she made such a guess was purely because she knew something. But what about Rong Xiu? He knew about it too? Chu Luiyue paused. Because of Situ Yan's help, His Majesty hasn't deposed the Crown Prince yet. Even the Empress hasn't been officially deposed. However, many people had already sensed that something wasn't right. Now all kinds of guesses were running rampant and people's hearts were shaken. His Majesty ordered a thorough investigation of Heptagon Alley, but there hasn't been any progress. Your Highness, what exactly do you plan to do? Rong Xiu kept all the chess pieces and looked at Chu Luiyue's curious face. He couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her forehead lightly. Even though taking an extra step won't win you, it will make it more exciting. Besides, that way you'll be able to win more happily. Crown Prince Mansion. As Rong Jin was under house arrest again, the entire Crown Prince Mansion's atmosphere became very solemn. Everyone was dejected and lifeless. They didn't have the smug look that the Crown Prince had when he was in the limelight. Who would have thought that the Crown Prince that everyone envied would end up in such a state? Even though His Majesty hadn't given any orders, rumors were spreading in the imperial city. Everyone said that even the Empress was under house arrest this time, and it was only a matter of time before the Crown Prince was deposed. Chu Xianmin sat in her room. It was already late autumn and the weather gradually turned cold. Her residence was cold and cheerless, like a cellar in the dead of winter. Her hand slowly touched the veil on her face. Even though she was the only one here, she didn't dare to show her face. This was because even she was afraid of seeing that face. Back then, when had she ever thought that she would end up like this? She thought for a long time and finally stood up. She heard that Situ Xingqian was visiting Crown Prince Mansion today, so she had to go and greet her. When she walked outside, the road was terrifyingly quiet. It wasn't much better than her place. She walked all the way to the front hall. After walking for a distance, she finally saw people on the road. Most of them were servants, but these people only bowed to her hastily when they saw her and hurriedly left. Chu Xianmin couldn't help but mock herself. When these people met her in the past, they would think of ways to tease her. Now they couldn't even be bothered to do that. She could vaguely hear those people's whispers. I really don't know what eldest Princess Situ wants. Now that the Crown Prince and Her Majesty are under house arrest, they will be deposed sooner or later. She still hasn't cancelled her marriage agreement with the Crown Prince. Isn't she finding trouble for herself? Who knows? Maybe she's infatuated with him and is willing to die for him? I don't think so. You didn't see how eldest princess treated the crown prince. I just went in to serve tea but I didn't see any smile on her face. She said that she's here to visit the crown prince, but anyone who saw her would think that she was forced to come. Who can force her? She's the apple of country Xingluo's emperor's eye. Anyway, with her around, His Majesty won't do anything to the crown prince for the time being. But I think we should find another way out. This crown prince's palace, it was hard to say when it would completely change. I heard that His Majesty has been treating the third prince very well recently. He seems to be planning to make him a prince. Zhou Xian clenched her teeth and walked forward. In the front hall, Rongjin and Situ Xingqian sat opposite each other. After experiencing the past few days, Rongjin had lost a lot of weight and looked very haggard. Even his last bit of energy was almost depleted. He was worried about the Empress and himself. He was anxious for a few days and nights, so he naturally became like this. Luckily, he still kept his position as the crown prince. Xingqian, I really don't know how to thank you. Rongjin looked at Situ Xingqian in front of him with a face full of gratitude. I knew you wouldn't sit by and do nothing. In Rongjin's opinion, Situ Yen must have been willing to help because Situ Xingqian had begged him. Hence he treasured Situ Xingqian even more in his heart. However, Situ Xingqian didn't think so. Being stared at by Rongjin with such a gaze, she felt goosebumps all over her body and she almost couldn't sit still. If it weren't for father's orders, I wouldn't have come no matter what. Your Highness, you don't have to be so polite. This is what I should do. Situ Xingqian almost clenched her teeth and spat out this sentence. However, Rongjin didn't notice her thoughts at all as he sighed deeply and sighed. It's a pity that father thinks that mother is guilty and won't let me see her. I also don't know what's going on with her. Situ Xingqian was impatient to listen to this. She recalled her former father's instructions and asked softly in a seemingly unintentional manner. Your Highness, His Majesty is doing this because of Heptagon Alley. Do you know what's going on in there? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 380. Rongjin knitted his brows. I don't know either. Mother didn't mention it to me before. That day it was my first time at Heptagon Alley. As for the so-called bronze cauldron and the hundreds of skeletons, he had never heard of them before. Situ Xingqian knitted her brows undetectably and continued to ask, unwilling to give up. But if Her Majesty really did it, it should be for you. I said I don't know. Rongjin retorted in disgust. Besides, Mother is just a woman in the palace. How can she do such a thing? Those skeletons belonged to cultivators, and there were even some outstanding warriors among them. However, Mother's cultivation talent was average and she stayed in the palace for many years. With her abilities alone, it was impossible for her to complete this series of actions. In Rongjin's eyes, all of this was Rongjio and the rest slander. Let's not talk about this and talk about Rongjin. Rongjin did go missing back then and Mother was very worried about it. She even looked for him several times to discuss countermeasures. If Mother really sent Rongjin to Heptagon Alley long ago, why did she have to act in front of me? Wasn't that a waste of time and energy? In Rongjin's impression, Mother had always trusted him. Since he was young, he knew that he was Mother's hope and he carried her heavy burden. Mother could give up everything for him. Even if Mother hid it from the entire world, she would definitely treat him honestly. Hence he never believed that Mother did those things from the start to the end. Father, you're just temporarily blinded. When I find out the truth, everything will naturally come to light. Rongjin clenched his teeth. Upon hearing this, Situ Xingqian sneered in her heart. Blinded? Rongjin could only say this to himself. The Empress's reaction that day was enough to explain the problem. Other than Rongjin's strange appearance, everything else was clearly related to the Empress. Situ Xingqian rubbed the teacup but didn't drink it. She looked down at her reflection in the tea and her eyes were cold. However, her voice was still as gentle as water. Your Highness, you're right. I don't believe in those things either. If not, you wouldn't have come out to help, right? But, given the current situation, you have to think of a solution as soon as possible. If not, Her Majesty's life in the palace won't be good. Rongjin knitted his brows tightly. Then tell me, what should we do? Father refuses to see me now. Does Your Highness know that Lord Chu Ning and the third prince are investigating Heptagon Alley together? If they really found out something, wouldn't it be easy for His Majesty to convict him? In other words, the future of you and the Empress is now in their hands. How could I not know that? Rongjin rubbed his face in frustration. Let's not talk about Chuning, but Rongjio has a deep grudge against me and my son. He will definitely take this opportunity to secretly do something. Your Highness, in my opinion, the crux of this matter lies in Heptagon Alley. I believe that those things were definitely not done by the Empress, but she definitely knows something, don't you think? Rongjin didn't say anything. If Her Majesty tells you everything she knows, then you'll be able to deal with the current situation better. So why don't you go and consult the Empress? Rongjin pondered for a long time and felt that this was indeed a good idea. But the most troublesome thing was, but Imperial Mother and I can't see each other right now, so how can I ask? Situ Xingqian's lips curved up slightly and she revealed a gentle smile. You forgot that Xingqian can enter the palace. Zhou Xian, who had walked to the door, suddenly stood still when she heard this. Then she heard Rongjin's excited voice. Xingqian, you're indeed the best woman in the world. It's my great fortune to be able to marry you as my crown princess. Zhou Xian felt as if countless needles were pricking her heart and it was very painful. She clenched her fists tightly and many thoughts flashed across her mind. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, her gaze became firm and she turned to leave. Chu Luiyue came to Mu Qinghe's residence again. Just as he walked to the door, he heard a joyful chirp. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw Hong Yao excitedly flapping its wings and flying over. Even though they had not seen each other for half a month, Chu Luiyue missed Hong Yao quite a bit. Seeing her welcoming him so enthusiastically, he couldn't help but smile. Hong Yao, have you been obedient recently? Hong Yao flew one round around Chu Luiyue and flapped its wings vigorously. Chu Luiyue even saw a faint layer of green fire. This was clearly an affirmative answer. Chu Luiyue smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. Don't worry. I didn't forget to bring you a gift. Hong Yao chirped happily again. Chu Luiyue took out her cosmic bag and was about to take out the item when she suddenly felt a gaze on her. It was almost tangible. She paused in her actions and looked up. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms and leaned against the door frame as he looked at her with interest. How strange. Hong Yao isn't your fiend. Why do you care so much about it? Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. It's been more than 10 days. Why hasn't this fellow left yet? As if he had seen through Chu Luiyue's thoughts, Jian Fengqi smiled flirtatiously and proudly. It's easy to invite me here, but it's not so easy to ask me to leave. Chu Luiyue tried her best to look calm and polite as she curtsied. Greetings, young Master Jian. Jian Fengqi suddenly said, do you know that Mu Qinghe only allows Hong Yao to accept gifts from one person? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 381. Chu Luiyue put away the Qingkuan bag with a calm expression and smiled faintly. How would Lu Yu know about this kind of thing? Jian Fengqi's gaze fell on her hand. He raised his chin and smiled carelessly. Actually, that's not important. Anyway, it's all in the past. What did you bring for Hong Yao? Can I have a look? Chu Luiyue put the things back into the Qingkuan bag without batting an eyelid. Young Master Jian, you must be joking. It's just some ordinary things. They're not worthy of your attention. Since you said that Vice Admiral Mu only allowed Hong Yao to receive a gift from one person, then I won't embarrass myself here. If I offend you, please forgive me. Hong Yao drooped its head in disappointment and immediately glared at Jian Fengqi. It's all his fault. If this guy hadn't suddenly appeared, it would definitely have gotten the gift. It had been waiting for half a month. Jian Fengqi's lips curled into an evil smile, and his eyebrows were naturally flirtatious. Miss Chu, why are you so nervous? I see that Mu Qinghe thinks quite highly of you. Who knows, maybe he'll make an exception for you. After all, the girl in front of him had a pair of eyes that were so similar to that person's. Chu Luiyue didn't want to continue talking about this with Jian Fengqi, so she quietly changed the topic. Thank you for your kindness, young Master Jian. In fact, I came here today to see if Vice Admiral Mu had come back. I came here once a few days ago, but you weren't here at that time. She guessed that Mu Qinghe must have encountered something at that time because he always kept his promises. Since he said 10 days, there must be some special reasons why he didn't stay here to see her. Jian Fengqi looked at Chu Luiyue thoughtfully. For some reason he always felt that Chu Luiyue didn't seem to want to talk to him much. The looming feeling of being despised came back again. How strange. He had always been very popular in front of women. He didn't know how he had offended Chu Luiyue to make her treat him like this. It seems like the women of country Yaochen aren't very friendly to me. He let out a long sigh. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes and smiled politely. Young Master Jian, please don't misunderstand. I'm just worried that Vice Admiral Mu might have been delayed by something. I'm not displeased with you at all. Perhaps someone else made young Master Jian unhappy? It was obvious that he had suffered a setback somewhere. However, she was also curious. There were not many people who could suppress Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's icy eyes were filled with resentment. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, he swallowed the words in his throat and turned to walk inside. Forget it, forget it. This young master has never liked to fuss over such things. As he walked, he dragged out his words and spoke lazily. Mu Qinghe, the little girl is looking for you. Chu Luiyue inexplicably shuddered. Little girl? This guy must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts to call her that. Chu Luiyue secretly gritted her teeth and made a mental note of Jian Fengqi. She suppressed the unhappiness in her heart and followed him. Jian Fengqi casually waved his hand without turning his head. He's in the backyard. You can go by yourself. After saying that, he strode toward the other side as if he couldn't be bothered to care about this. Chu Luiyue thanked him and walked toward the backyard. Seeing that Jian Fengqi had left, Hong Yao followed again. It circled Chu Luiyue and blinked its eyes, unwilling to give up. Since that guy is no longer here, I can give it the present, right? Chu Luiyue stared at it and shook her head. Hong Yao, no. It was obvious that the only person Jian Fengqi mentioned who could give Hong Yao a present was her, the former Shangguanyu. In the past she didn't know about this at all, so she said that she would bring a present for Hong Yao without any scruples. But now that she knew, she naturally couldn't do that anymore. Mu Qinghe had a lot of doubts about her, so she had to be cautious. Seeing her determined expression, Hong Yao lowered its wings in disappointment, landed on the ground and walked forward step by step listlessly. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips, but she still didn't give in. In fact, she said that she would bring a present for Hong Yao at first just to coax it, but it gradually became a habit. But she never knew that Mu Qinghe would only let Hong Yao accept gifts from her alone. I really don't know what Mu Qinghe is thinking. Suddenly Hong Yao stopped. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw that in the spacious backyard, Mu Qinghe was practicing with a saber. He said that he was practicing with a saber, but in fact, what he was holding in his hand was just an ordinary 3-inch wooden saber. Although it was just an ordinary wooden saber in Mu Qinghe's hand, it seemed to be filled with murderous intent. Even though there was still a distance between them, Chu Luiyue could still feel the fierce aura that almost cut everything. Vice Admiral Mu. Chu Luiyue saluted. Mu Qinghe didn't stop and his wooden saber danced smoothly. Chu Luiyue could even see the black cracks in the void wherever the saber passed. It could be seen that Mu Qinghe's strength was indeed stronger than before. Whoosh. Mu Qinghe's movements were so fast that he left several afterimages in the courtyard. Immediately he raised his hand and stabbed. The wooden saber in his hand flew out in an instant. Swoosh, swoosh. Those afterimages were pierced one after another. They dissipated with a loud bang. Chu Luiyue knitted her brows unnoticeably. Mu Qinghe didn't seem to be in a good mood. To put it nicely, he didn't show his emotions, but to put it bluntly, he had an icy face. In Chu Luiyue's impression, she had almost never seen him reveal his emotions. But from his appearance just now, it seemed that he had encountered something terrible. But she didn't say anything, just stood quietly by the side and waited. Finally, when the last afterimage was pierced, the wooden saber flew back to Mu Qinghe's hand. He slowly exhaled and looked back at Chu Luiyue. At this time, his eyes were as cold and indifferent as ever, without the slightest fluctuation. Vice Admiral Mu, the last time I came you weren't here, so... I know. Mu Qinghe didn't wait for Chu Luiyue to finish her explanation and interrupted her. Suddenly he stared at Chu Luiyue and sized her up. Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled faintly. Vice Admiral Mu, why are you looking at me like that? Mu Qinghe was silent for a moment, then suddenly said. It seems that your trip wasn't in vain. Chu Luiyue was slightly stunned. She didn't break through this time, So where did Mu Qinghe's words come from? Without waiting for her to ask, Mu Qinghe suddenly threw the wooden saber in his hand at Chu Liyue. Swoosh! The wooden saber was wrapped in an astonishing force and it went straight for Chu Liyue. Its speed was so fast that Chu Liyue didn't have time to dodge. Now she could either be pierced or brace herself to receive it. Chu Liyue subconsciously turned sideways and at the same time, reached out with her right hand. Mu Qinghe's eyes suddenly sharpened. This movement. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 382. Chu Liyue suddenly paused. Almost at the same time, two figures, one green and one red, quickly appeared in front of Chu Liyue. They were Hong Yao and Dumpling. Dumpling quickly went forward and went straight for the wooden saber. Its fluffy body easily landed on the wooden saber. In the next moment it opened its mouth and bit down hard. Crack! With this crisp sound, a large piece of the wooden saber's blade was bitten off by Dumpling. On the other side, Hong Yao flapped its wings and a ball of green flame landed on the wooden saber. With a boom it burst into flames. Dumpling sensed the movement and turned around to take a look. It saw that the green flame was almost burning its tail. It bared its teeth at Hong Yao angrily. Hong Yao threw it a provocative look. In the next moment the two of them retreated. The wooden saber turned into a pile of ashes an arm's length away from Chu Liyue. Dumpling returned to Chu Liyue's shoulder first and showed its tail to Chu Liyue. Ow ow! That bird was too hateful. It was almost burned to death. Chu Liyue looked at it coldly. Yes, it burned 3 of its feathers. If you discovered it a little later it would have grown back on its own. Dumpling was speechless. The red demon let out 2 clear cries and flapped its wings proudly. It deserved it. It was its fault for being so slow. It hadn't improved at all after such a long time. Dumpling was furious, but when it thought of how it had suffered because it was inferior to Hong Yao, it could only turn around angrily and point its butt at Hong Yao to show its anger. Actually, Chu Liyue really wanted to criticize Hong Yao for abusing her power for personal revenge, but she knew better in front of Mu Qinghe. Besides, Hong Yao had attacked to help her. She slowly lowered her arm and the tense muscles all over her body also relaxed. Mu Qinghe's eyes flashed with disappointment. When he saw Chu Liyue's actions just now, he thought, what is Vice Admiral Mu planning to do? Chu Liyue didn't seem to notice anything wrong and said with a smile, I'm afraid you've overestimated me. I can't take one of your moves now. It's all thanks to Dumpling and Hong Yao. Mu Qinghe's face was a little cold as he gave Hong Yao a warning look. Hong Yao, who was still smug a moment ago, suddenly froze. He was too anxious just now. It rushed out just like that. Chu Liyue was a little nervous. It was only when she was about to make a move that she realized that Mu Qinghe was probably doing this to test her. People's instincts were very easy to be exposed. She was already halfway. Mu Qinghe would definitely notice that something was amiss if she fully displayed her movement technique. Luckily, Dumpling and Hong Yao attacked in time. Chu Liyue lightly patted Dumpling. She felt at ease when she felt the soft and furry touch. Follow me out. Chu Liyue nodded. Chu Liyue was dazed. Yao. Mu Qinghe glanced at her. Why? Do you have other things to do? Chu Liyue shook her head. Well, even if there was, Mu Qinghe probably wouldn't care. After all, nobody dared to offend him here. Even Emperor Zhou had to make way for him, let alone others. Mu Qinghe nodded and walked outside. Chu Liyue hesitated for a moment but still followed. Vice Admiral Mu, may I ask where we're going? You'll know when we get there. Mu Qinghe's reply was very cold and arbitrary. She clearly didn't give Chu Liyue any room to bargain. Chu Liyue knitted her brows. Mu Qinghe has always done things like this, so I'm not surprised. But if I don't even know where we're going, I'll feel uncomfortable. However, Mu Qinghe clearly didn't intend to explain to me. When they reached the front yard, Jian Fengqi suddenly walked out. Oh, where are you bringing the little girl? He smiled and teased. Mu Qinghe coldly glanced at him. This isn't something you should interfere in. Jian Fengqi raised his hands. This isn't the time for you to invite me over. Mu Qinghe, you're getting better at kicking me to the curb after I've outlived my usefulness. He was clearly just teasing, but Mu Qinghe's expression suddenly stiffened for a moment. Jian Fengqi also seemed to realize something. He coughed and turned his gaze to Chu Liyue. Miss Chu, there's something I'd like to ask. Please speak, young Master Jian. Jian Fengqi rubbed his chin with one hand and seemed to be in a dilemma. Is this young master ugly? Chu Liyue thought she heard wrong and slightly widened her eyes. But when she saw Jian Fengqi's thoughtful expression, she was sure that he really did say that. What's wrong with this guy? Who doesn't know that Jian Fengqi's second best skill is alchemy and his first best skill is narcissism? Jian Fengqi's naturally flirtatious eyes and free and unrestrained style. Even Chu Liyue, who always disliked him, had to admit that Jian Fengqi's charm and appearance were indeed top-notch. Otherwise, how could he come and go freely among the flowers? Young Master Jian is handsome and elegant. Naturally, you have nothing to do with the word ugly. Jian Fengqi's straight brows knitted even tighter. I think so too, but someone said that this young master is ugly. Chu Liyue asked curiously. I wonder who that person is. What kind of insight is this? Jian Fengqi's gaze became very subtle and his thin lips spat out a name. Mu Hongyu. Chu Liyue was speechless. It seems that a lot of interesting things have happened while I was away. Jian Fengqi had always been a person who thought highly of himself and was especially confident in his appearance. He had lived for so many years, but this should be the first time that someone called him ugly. No wonder he was so resentful. Unfortunately, according to Mu Hongyu's personality, this kind of person was the last person she liked. This was also because Jian Fengqi had cured the princess consort of Pingzhang's illness. Mu Hongyu must have said this because she couldn't bear it anymore. One could imagine how much Mu Hongyu didn't like Jian Fengqi. Chu Liyue came to a realization and comforted him with a smile. Hongyu has always been outspoken. Don't take it to heart. Jian Fengqi was speechless. She didn't seem to be comforting him. I heard from her that there's someone called Rong Xiu who is dozens of times more charming than me. Chu Liyue's mouth twitched. She didn't hear wrongly. Jian Fengqi said, Rong Xiu? Oh, by the way, she also said that person is your fiancé? Jian Fengqi stared at Chu Liyue and asked. Only then did Chu Liyue realize that Jian Fengqi hadn't seen Rong Xiu since he came here. She coughed. Yes. His Highness Prince Li is indeed my fiancé. Jian Fengqi thought for a moment and suddenly walked outside. I'd like to see what kind of person that Rong Xiu is. Chu Liyue was about to say something when there was a sudden movement from the side. She turned her head to take a look. A long sword suddenly floated in the air. Mu Qinghe was standing on it with a solemn and cold expression. Come up. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 383. Palace. Imperial Study. Emperor Zhou looked at the book in his hands, and the more he read, the more tightly he knitted his brows. Finally, he threw the book aside with a puff sound. Chuning, I asked you to search Heptagon Alley with all your might, but you only found these useless things? Chuning, who was respectfully standing with his hands by his side, immediately knelt down and said, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. I've already used all my connections and methods, but I can only find out this much. Even though there are hundreds of skeletons in Heptagon Alley, other than recognizing that they're all cultivators, I can't find any other information about their identities. Anything that can reveal their identities has been specially taken care of, and I can't find anything at all. Other than the hanging corpse, the other skeletons don't even have a single piece of clothing on them. The person who did this was clearly very careful. Chuning didn't sleep or rest these few days and even dug 3 feet into Heptagon Alley. However, other than piles of skeletons, he really didn't find anything else. Emperor Zhou rubbed his glabella in frustration. He knew that this matter wouldn't be so easily investigated, and there was no point in sitting here and being anxious. However, once he thought of the bronze cauldron stained with dried, dark red blood, he would be filled with worry. Chuning glanced at Emperor Zhou and continued speaking. Refused to investigate. Her Majesty goes to Heptagon Alley once every 2 months on average, and she's very secretive. She only stays there for a short while, so nobody discovered her after such a long time. Emperor Zhou's face darkened. In actual fact, he had personally interrogated the Empress a few times, but the Empress was very tight-lipped. From start to end, she only said that she did everything, but she didn't mention if she prepared it for Rongjin or why she did it. In the middle, with Emperor Zhaowen's silent approval, his subordinates even tortured the Empress, but they still didn't find any useful clues. Whenever he thought about how the Empress had deceived him for so many years without him noticing, he felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to his head, causing him to shudder. Knock knock. Your Majesty, the third prince wishes to see you. Eunuch Min carefully said outside. Let him in. Emperor Zhaowen took a deep breath in and looked at Rongjio, who pushed the door open and asked, What's the news? Do you have any news? The moment Rongjio came in and saw Chuning kneeling on the floor, he realized that Chuning probably didn't find anything. He first bowed respectfully and then slowly said, I'm sorry. Your son has personally interrogated all the servants in the Empress Palace and obtained some information that might be useful. Emperor Zhaowen finally perked up. Speak. Rongjio said, according to the Empress' personal maid, the Empress keeps a box for herself and never allows anyone else to touch it. Every once in a while the Empress would lock herself in her bedroom. At first the palace servants didn't think much of it. Later, a eunuch accidentally broke in and finally found that the Empress was inside and seemed to be looking at the things in the box. Emperor Zhaowen pondered for a moment. What kind of box is it? Why does she value it so much? Why didn't I know about it? Rongjio sneered in his heart. Emperor Zhaowen and the Empress didn't have any feelings for each other, especially Emperor Zhaowen. He probably didn't even put 10% of his thoughts on the Empress. If he cared about the Empress before, he wouldn't let the Empress do so many messy things under his nose. The Empress frequently went in and out of Heptagon Alley and kept killing cultivators to accumulate strength for the Bronze Cauldron. Even Emperor Zhaowen didn't know, let alone a small box. It was really too easy to hide it from Emperor Zhaowen. Thinking of this, Rongjio couldn't help but mock himself. It was also because of this that the Empress didn't receive any punishment even after silently killing his mother. Emperor Zhaowen didn't treat his mother any better. Rongjio suppressed his emotions and looked calm. I didn't ask about this. After all, the palace servants don't dare to ask about the Empress's things. But the eunuch who accidentally discovered this incident fell into the lake and drowned not long after. After that, the Empress's palace servants kept their mouths shut about this incident. This time he had to use some tricks to finally get the answer he wanted. I think that if we can find that box, many problems can be solved. Emperor Zhaowen looked solemn. You're saying that the box has something to do with Heptagon Alley? This is only your son's guess. In the current situation where there are no other clues, this is the only feasible path. Emperor Zhaowen thought for a while and felt that this made sense. Since this is the case, Rongjio, go find the Empress and ask her to hand the item over. Rongjio hesitated. Father, since Her Majesty values that box so much, she probably won't hand it over easily. Tell her that if she honestly hands it over, I might give Rongjin a chance. He's stubborn. Let her decide what to do. An undetectable cold glint flashed across Rongjio's eyes. Yes, Your Majesty. With that, he quickly excused himself. Emperor Zhaowen looked at Chuning helplessly. Chuning, you have to hurry up on your side. If you really can't do it, start from other areas. Go and check all the people who have close contact with the Empress and Rongjin. Yes. After Chuning left, Emperor Zhaowen then relaxed his body and leaned against the chair. Chuning is good at everything, but he doesn't have enough means. In comparison, Rongjio's work efficiency was much higher. After all, he was trained in the Northwest Army. Thinking of this, Emperor Zhaowen vaguely felt uncomfortable in his heart. In the past, he never thought of leaving the position for Rongjio because he really didn't like this son of his. Besides, his murderous aura was too strong, and it even made Emperor Zhaowen wary sometimes. But now it seems like Rongjin can't do it. Among the remaining princes, Rongjio actually became the most suitable one. Even if he's cold and murderous, it's better than being weak and useless. What a pity! Emperor Zhaowen sighed as if he was instantly 10 years old. If only Rongjio's health was better. In the Empress's bedroom, the once bustling and prosperous place disappeared in the blink of an eye, and it was now cold and lonely. Only heavy guards were left, trapping the Empress here. When Xianxia arrived here, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Emperor Zhaowen actually hates the Empress so much that he's so guarded against her. A guard saw Xianxia and immediately went forward. Eldest Princess Situ, please stop. His Majesty has ordered that nobody is allowed to come close. Situ Xianxia took out a token from her sleeves and put on the dignified posture of an eldest princess. I'm here on orders. That guard took a look and recognized that it was indeed His Majesty's token. He hurriedly moved aside. Eldest Princess Situ, please. Situ Xianxia put away the token and calmly walked into the Empress's palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Bitch. You are indeed insidious. Situ Xianxia did not expect the Empress to suddenly flare up, so she was momentarily stunned. The paper ball didn't hurt when it hit her face, but it was a great humiliation to her. She picked up the ball of paper and the smile on her face faded. Your Majesty, what are you doing? I was kind enough to help you and the Crown Prince, but you treat me like this? Bitch. Do you think this consort doesn't know what you're thinking? The Empress's face flushed red as she pointed at Situ Xianxia's nose and scolded her. Rongjin can't tell what you're thinking, but do you think I can't tell? No wonder you haven't cancelled the marriage agreement until now. It's because you want to persuade him to get this information from me. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. Even though I'm down and about to be executed anytime, it doesn't mean that I'm dumb. Previously, when I saw Situ Xianxia, I already felt that this woman's thoughts weren't pure and that she wasn't what she looked like on the surface. It seems like this is indeed the case. The smile on Situ Xianxia's face completely disappeared as she tightly clenched the paper ball in her hands. That was Rongjin's handwritten letter, and he wrote it under her hints. Of course, she knew what was written on it. The general idea was that Rongjin couldn't go out because he was under house arrest, so he asked Situ Xianxia to visit the Empress on his behalf. He also asked the Empress to tell Situ Xianxia the secret of Heptagon Alley so that she could relay it to him. Rongjin felt that he could only think of a solution to solve his current predicament if he knew what was going on. When the Empress saw this, how could she not understand? Situ Xianxia originally had nothing to do with this matter, but she was now busy. How could she not have any ulterior motives? Her Majesty, you must have misunderstood. I don't have such intentions. The Crown Prince is your biological son. If you don't even trust him, won't this situation be unsolvable? Get lost, yelled the Empress hysterically. If it weren't for the fact that half of my body couldn't move, I would have directly gone forward and hit this B*teeth out. Situ Xianxia's gaze landed on the Empress's legs, and she vaguely guessed something as she said with disappointment, I thought you loved the Crown Prince the most. I originally thought that you doted on the Crown Prince the most. I didn't expect that you could bear to watch him fall into such a desperate situation. Since you insist on this, then I have no other choice. As she spoke, she really turned around and left without a care. She had just taken a few steps when she heard the Empress's voice behind her. What did you just say? Situ Xianxia's lips curled up slightly and delight flashed across her eyes. But when she turned around, her expression had already returned to normal. She sighed and said, You've been trapped in the palace for a long time. You probably don't know that His Majesty has already decided to remove the Crown Prince and appoint the third prince as the Crown Prince. The Empress was stunned. Impossible. I know that you don't trust me, but there's no other way now that things have come to this. If you don't believe me, you can ask the people in your palace if they've all been captured by the third prince for interrogation. Can't you guess why His Majesty wants to hand this matter to the third prince? Situ Xianxia's voice was as gentle as usual, but it was like a cold, poisonous snake slowly crawling into the Empress's heart. Her lips trembled violently and her entire body started shaking very quickly. No. Rongjin is the Crown Prince. Rongjin is the only Crown Prince. Seeing the Empress's reaction, confusion flashed across Situ Xianxia's heart. Why does she care so much about this matter? I'm going to find His Majesty. He can't appoint someone else as the Crown Prince. The Empress screamed and directly fell off the bed. Only Rongjin. Has to be Rongjin. Situ Xianxia suddenly realized something and purposely said, The third prince is outstanding. If he's appointed as the Crown Prince, the public will be convinced. What do you know? Shouted the Empress sharply with a hideous face. Who does Rongjin think he is? Rongjin is heaven's chosen son. Other than him, nobody else is fit to be the crown prince. Digression. The backstage reaction is really slow. Recently we've changed to a new comment section and everyone is still used to it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 385. Situ Xingqian's eyes lit up. Heaven's chosen son. This is the biggest secret hidden in Rongjin. Once the words left her mouth, the Empress immediately reacted. I still said this out loud. Furthermore, I said it in front of Situ Xingqian. Bang. Cut. The Empress was furious as she picked up the things beside her and threw them at Situ Xingqian. You be *Tithi. How dare you scheme against me? She had kept this secret for many years and didn't even tell anyone about the torture she had suffered these few days. She didn't expect Situ Xingqian to find out in the end. The Empress's hand was cut by the sharp shards and it was covered in blood. However, she couldn't feel the pain at all as her mind was filled with thoughts of how to kill Situ Xingqian in front of her. But the current her was a useless person. She couldn't even walk on her own, so how could she deal with Situ Xingqian? Situ Xingqian easily avoided her attack, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she took 2 steps forward and squatted down in front of the Empress. Her Majesty, did you just say, Heaven's chosen son? What does that mean? The Empress raised her hand and was about to slap her. Situ Xingqian grabbed her wrist with a smile on her face, but the corners of her eyes were filled with iciness and threat. Since you've already said it, why don't you tell me everything? Don't worry, I'll definitely tell His Highness everything without leaving out a single word. I'm guessing that this is the reason why my father wants me to get engaged to His Highness, right? The blood in the Empress's chest rumbled as she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. I didn't guess wrongly. Situ Xingqian is up to no good. There was also her sinister and cunning imperial father. Who the hell told you? The Empress tried her best to break free from Situ Xingqian, but it was to no avail. In the end, she could only scream at her. I've never told anyone about this. Even Rongjin, I only revealed a bit of information. Until now, I still don't know what it means. But how did that old fool Situ Yen find out? Many things that had happened in the past quickly flashed before his eyes, like pearls that were finally strung together by a string. No wonder Situ Yen interacted and suggested a marriage. No wonder they liked Rongjin from the start. No wonder the engagement hasn't been annulled yet. This treacherous father and daughter pair had come for this very reason. Situ Xingqian's ears buzzed from the Empress's ruckus, and she had completely exhausted her last bit of patience. She shook off the Empress and looked down at her. Your Majesty, there doesn't seem to be any point in talking about this now. Why don't you just say what you need to say? Only then can you protect the crown prince, right? Besides, if it weren't for my father and my help, you and the crown prince wouldn't have survived until today. Now we can be considered to be on the same boat. Why must you persist so bitterly? Don't tell me you still want to salvage the situation by yourself, with your half-crippled body? Situ Xingqian wasn't polite with her words. The Empress was filled with hatred. But after thinking about it for a long time, she realized that Situ Xingqian's words made sense. It wasn't a good idea to continue resisting like this. She had worked so hard and put in so much effort to get to where she was today. How could she let all her efforts go to waste? After a long silence, she finally looked up at Situ Xingqian. If you want this consort to tell you, it's not impossible. However, you have to swear on it. If you betray Rongjin and me in the future, may lightning strike you to death. Situ Xingqian was elated. What's so scary about swearing? As long as I know what the so-called Heaven's chosen son means, I have ways to solve this problem. Okay. I, Situ Xingqian, swear here. Greetings, third prince. A voice was suddenly heard from outside the palace. Situ Xingqian was shocked and immediately looked outside. Why is Rongjio here at this time? How's Her Majesty today? This is clearly Rongjio's voice. Your Majesty, Her Majesty is still the same as before. She stays in the palace and refuses to come out. I'll go in and take a look. As Rongjio spoke, he walked into the palace. The guards all knew that Rongjio was sent by His Majesty to investigate the Empress, so they directly let him in. The footsteps got closer and closer. Situ Xingqian started to panic. If Rongjio finds out that I'm here, everything will be exposed. She hurriedly leaned in front of the Empress and softly said, Your Majesty, you know what to do. For the Crown Prince, you should know what to do. Then she immediately found a place to hide. Creak. The door was pushed open and Rongjio's figure appeared at the entrance. Rongjio immediately saw the situation in the palace. He squinted his eyes. Her Majesty, what's wrong with you? Mu Qinghe brought Chu Luiyue on her sword and headed north. As they had set up a barrier, the two of them didn't attract anyone's attention as they silently left the imperial city. Seeing that they were out of the city gate, Chu Luiyue found it even stranger. Where exactly is Mu Qinghe bringing me? This direction. Normally, nobody would come here because there are many mountains here and the terrain is dangerous. More importantly, if we continue forward, we'll reach country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. However, Mu Qinghe had been silent so she couldn't ask anything. The two of them continued forward like this. When she saw the extremely steep mountain peak, Chu Luiyue finally confirmed her guess. Mu Qinghe brought me to country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. Looking down from midair, one could even clearly see the soldiers in charge of guarding the mountain peak. A faintly discernible barrier enveloped the entire mountain peak within it. Chu Luiyue was secretly shocked. This barrier's strength is much stronger than I expected. It's as if a stage 6 warrior set it up. An idea popped up in Mu Qinghe's mind, and she finally brought Chu Luiyue to the foot of the mountain. After Chu Luiyue stood still, she suppressed the doubts in her heart and looked up. Golden Inheritance Peak. This was the highest and most dangerous mountain peak within 50 kilometers of the imperial city. Country Yao Chen's past emperors were all buried in the imperial mausoleum at the foot of this mountain peak. At first glance, it was like a sword had landed from the sky and harshly pierced into the ground. Sharp, majestic, disdainful. Chu Luiyue had never been here before. The reason why she knew about this place was because the appearance of Golden Inheritance Peak was extremely similar to the iconic sharp sword sculpture outside Tianlu Academy. Back then, she had inadvertently discovered this and had been secretly surprised for a long time. Vice Admiral Mu, why did you bring me here? Chu Luiyue turned to look at Mu Qinghe. However, Mu Qinghe's expression was a little secretive. He stared at Golden Inheritance Peak for a long time before speaking in a deep voice. Enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Digression, I'm going to eat noodles. It's so tiring. Let's talk about losing weight tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 386. Chu Luiyue thought that he had heard wrongly. What? Mu Qinghe lifted his chin. I'll open the barrier later. It won't attract anyone's attention. You can just follow me in. Chu Luiyue was dumbfounded. After all this time, Mu Qinghe was really going to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Vice Admiral Mu, this isn't very appropriate, right? We're not from country Yao Chen's royal family. How can we casually enter a place like the Imperial Mausoleum? The problem wasn't whether it would attract anyone's attention, but that it wasn't right at all. Mu Qinghe glanced coldly at Chu Luiyue. He didn't show any anger. You don't want to go? Chu Luiyue was speechless. It's not that I don't want to go, but... Vice Admiral Mu, you have to have a reason for doing this, right? Chu Luiyue racked his brains, but he couldn't understand why Mu Qinghe would suddenly do this. Firstly, no one in country Yao Chen had offended Mu Qinghe, so there was no need for him to dig up their ancestral graves. Secondly, even if there were any treasures hidden in the Imperial Mausoleum, Mu Qinghe wouldn't be interested in them. He had a distinguished status in the Tianling dynasty, so what kind of rare items had he not seen before? Why did he have to barge into a mere imperial mausoleum in country Yao Chen? Mu Qinghe narrowed his eyes, and the scar on his face revealed a hint of fierceness. Chu Luiyue immediately felt a chill in his heart, so he obediently changed his tone. Please go ahead. With her current status, wouldn't she be looking for trouble if she asked Mu Qinghe for a reason? Since she was already here, she might as well go in with Mu Qinghe and see what he wanted to do. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was finally obedient, Mu Qinghe retracted his gaze. He raised his right hand and several silver rays quickly gathered, finally condensing into a strange pattern in his palm. Chu Luiyue quickly glanced at it and found that the pattern was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. But soon, Mu Qinghe pushed her hand forward, and the silver pattern immediately flew out. Buzz. A faint buzzing sound could be heard. Ripples suddenly appeared in the void in front of him. It was the barrier that enveloped the entire Golden Inheritance Peak. The moment the silver pattern touched the ripples on the barrier, the buzzing sound suddenly disappeared, and even the ripples were instantly frozen. In the next moment, the silver pattern quickly melted and silently seeped into the barrier. A crack immediately appeared in the middle of the frozen enchantment, and then it spread in all directions. Finally, a round entrance with a faint silver glow appeared in front of the two of them. Chu Liyue was slightly shocked. The Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier was not of a low grade, and its defensive power was also very strong. It was impossible to break through it so smoothly using ordinary methods. Generally speaking, only a specific item that was compatible with the barrier could open it completely without causing any ripples. Mu Qinghe obviously did not possess the key to Country Yao Chen's Imperial Mausoleum's barrier, but the scene before her eyes, Chu Liyue suddenly recalled that when she went to look for Mu Qinghe a few days ago he was not at home. She did not pay much attention to it at that time, but now that she thought about it she felt that it was a little strange. It was obviously not Mu Qinghe's first time here. It could be seen that he had put in a lot of effort in order to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Chu Liyue's mind raced, but her face was calm. Mu Qinghe turned around and glanced at her with a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. After a moment he turned around and walked forward. "Follow me." Chu Liyue took a deep breath and looked up at the steep mountain peak again, as well as the faintly discernible barrier. There were at least 100 guards guarding Golden Inheritance Peak, and there were definitely experts overseeing it. But now that the barrier had been opened they probably did not notice anything. She suppressed her thoughts and stepped over the barrier. Palace, Empress's bedroom. Faced with Rongjio's question, the Empress lowered her head and did not say a word. Rongjio was not surprised by her reaction. In actual fact, even though he did not personally interrogate the Empress during these few days, it did not mean that he did not know anything. Ever since they returned from Heptagon Alley, the Empress had been like this. It seemed like she had gone crazy again. Rongjio was too lazy to waste time and directly asked her. "Her Majesty, I heard that you have an extremely precious box?" Once this was said, the Empress seemed to be greatly agitated as she suddenly looked up. "What box? I don't have it. I don't know." Rongjio lightly said. "The people around you have already spilled the beans, yet you're still unwilling to admit it?" The Empress was stunned and instantly guessed a little. She had always kept that item very carefully. After so many years, it was only broken by a eunuch once. Even though that eunuch only glanced at it unintentionally and did not know anything, the Empress still killed him. She originally thought that it was foolproof, but she did not expect there to be a loophole. That eunuch must have told the others before he died. Rongjio had captured all the people in the palace and interrogated them these few days. I don't know what ruthless methods he used, but he actually managed to get this out. Seeing the Empress's resistance and that she still wanted to deny it, Rongjio straightforwardly said, "Father already knows. He told me to tell you this. He told me to tell you that if you hand over the box obediently, everything will be fine. But if you're unwilling, I'm afraid you can't bear the consequences." The Empress was filled with hatred. "I should have gotten someone to kill you in the Northwest Army back then." Back then she killed Rongjio's birth mother and originally wanted to kill Rongjio. However, she coincidentally met with Consort Wan's death, and Emperor Zhou was in deep sorrow. Hence she could not do anything, so she did not do anything. Who knew that Rongjio would rather go to the Northwest Army and train himself thousands of miles away? She thought that it was tough at the borders and that it was hard to predict life and death on the battlefield. Perhaps Rongjio would die there very quickly, so she gradually let go of this matter. Later on, when Rongjio had outstanding military achievements and rose up the ranks, it was very difficult for her to take action. Now Rongjio was clearly here to take revenge on her. Rongjio did not care about the Empress's complaints. "It seems like you're unwilling to hand over the item. I'll report to father now." Then he really turned around and left. The Empress was dazed. She originally thought that Rongjio would interrogate her strictly, but she did not expect him to let her off so easily. Actually, Rongjio had other thoughts in his heart. The Empress had held on for so long, but she did not say anything. It was obvious that she was prepared to die. Even if he interrogated the Empress here for an entire day and tortured her until she was half dead, it would be very difficult for him to get anything out of her. The Empress only had one weakness, Rongjin. Oh right. After I go back, I'll ask father to give you a way out and let brother come and see you. Phil. We're mother and son, so I believe father won't be so heartless. Let them see each other's current appearance. That scene would definitely be very exciting. Before the Empress could react, a soft sound came from behind the screen at the side. Rongjio paused in his footsteps and turned around with a knife-like gaze. Who's there? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 387. Nobody responded. Rongjio knitted his brows and stared at that spot for quite a while before suddenly turning around and walking toward the screen. The Empress has been locked up here alone for the past few days, and the outside is heavily guarded. It's impossible for anyone else to enter. The sound of footsteps resounded in the empty and deathly silent hall, almost suffocating everyone. Just as Rongjio was about to walk over, a macaw suddenly flew out. Rongjio immediately took action. A force turned into a sharp arrow, and it directly pierced through the macaw's stomach. Poof! Fresh blood splattered everywhere. That macaw immediately landed on the floor, and its body suddenly twitched twice before it stopped moving. Rongjio knitted his brows. He recognized this macaw as the Empress's pet. He didn't expect such a thing to be left in this palace. Suddenly, Rongjio focused his gaze and saw something hidden in the macaw's broken stomach. He immediately bent over and took a closer look. Then he took out the item hidden inside. It was a black ball. This item was only the size of a fingernail and looked very normal. However, Rongjio's expression became increasingly stern. This was because he recognized this black ball. This item was also known as an ink pearl. It looked like a normal black ball, but it could actually be used to transmit information. As long as one used a special method to decode it, one could obtain the information hidden inside. When he was in the military previously, he had also used such a method. However, this item was very rare and each ink pearl could only be used once, so he didn't use it many times. He didn't expect this to be hidden in the Empress's macaw's stomach. It was obvious what she wanted. He looked at the Empress and indeed saw her pale face as if she was in complete despair. I didn't expect Her Majesty to have such methods. Don't worry, I'll pass this ink pearl to father for him to take a closer look. Then Rongjio didn't stay any longer and quickly left the palace. After a long while, the Empress slowly covered her face. She had no more tears, only excruciating pain. After an unknown period of time, a gentle voice whispered into his ear. Her Majesty Xianxia is willing to help you. If you have any requests, just let me know. Princely Mansion. Rongjio looked at the sky and narrowed his eyes. In the past few days, he would come to Prince Li's residence at this time every time. But today, for some unknown reason, she was late. Umo, who was serving at the side, seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. Master, Miss Lu Yu went to Vice Admiral Mu's place today. She must have been delayed by something. What can he have? Rongjio said indifferently, then suddenly paused. Well, is Mu Qinghe in the residence today? Umo was stunned. I don't know either. Mu Qinghe was not an ordinary person. It was very difficult to monitor him. In the past few days he seemed to be more alert than before. Umo was worried that he would alert the enemy, so he withdrew most of the people who were secretly monitoring him. Rongjio's expression turned cold. He suddenly stood up. Find out where Mu Qinghe is right now. Yes. When Umo heard Rongjio's words, he suddenly reacted. Could it be that Master suspected that Mu Qinghe took Miss Lu Yu away? Master, we have people at the Imperial City Gate. If there is any movement, they should send a message. If Mu Qinghe doesn't want them to know, he naturally has a way. Rongjio's voice was cold, and there seemed to be a trace of coldness between his eyebrows. Umo's heart trembled. I know I was wrong. Before he could finish his words, Rongjio, who had just taken 2 steps, suddenly stopped and looked up at the sky. Umo looked up in puzzlement, but he saw a tall figure approaching quickly. He was flying in the sky. His movement seemed slow and relaxed, but his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already above Prince Li's residence. Umo was about to go forward, but he saw Rong Xiu pressing his hand down. Only then did he restrain himself, but his eyes were still fixed on the approaching person. Almost at the same time the approaching person also stopped. Jian Fengqi raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and looked down with surprise. He originally thought that Prince Li's residence was just an ordinary house, but after coming here he found that the internal and external defense here was much stronger than expected. Ordinary people would not be able to see anything from the outside. But with his eyesight he had just approached and felt an unusual aura. So he simply gave up on visiting from the front door and chose another more direct way. After looking in the sky for a while he finally confirmed his guess. In this huge Prince Li's residence, in addition to the tight defense, there was actually an extremely powerful Shen formation. He was very clear that if he continued to move forward, there would be a lot of trouble waiting for him. Jian Fengqi had always hated trouble, so he very consciously stopped. Anyway, he came today just to see what the rumored Rong Xiu looked like. So he stood in the air, one hand behind his back, and said with a smile, "This one is Jian Fengqi and I'm here to pay a visit to Prince Li." Yumo's whole body tensed up. Jian Fengqi? Wasn't that the celestial physician that Mu Qinghe invited from the Tianling dynasty? The news that he had cured the princess consort of Pingjiang some time ago had spread like wildfire in the imperial capital. Many people tried to find ways to meet him, but this Jian Fengqi was very arrogant and refused all of them, not even meeting a single one. After all, it was normal for a celestial physician with such a background to be arrogant. But what was even more amazing was that he could be said to be elusive. Many people waited day and night but still could not catch a glimpse of him. Why did such a person suddenly come to Prince Li's residence today? And he even said that he wanted to meet the master? Jian Fengqi's eyes suddenly focused as soon as he finished speaking. A young man in white stood in the middle of the courtyard. He looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, and his snow-white clothes seemed to be even whiter than the snow in the mountains. Just by standing there he seemed to have gathered all the light, making people involuntarily focus their attention on him. His appearance was noble and unparalleled, and his charm was unparalleled. Jian Fengqi believed that his appearance and temperament were top-notch, but when he saw the appearance of this young man in white, he instantly understood what it meant to feel inferior. In an instant he understood Mu Hongyu's words. Not to mention country Yaoqin, even in the Tianling dynasty, this young man's charm was almost unparalleled. Even Jiang Yuqing's thing was instantly at a disadvantage. Rong Xiu's voice was cold as he said indifferently, "May I know why young Master Jian is looking for me?" Jian Fengqi suddenly narrowed his eyes. "Your Highness, have we met somewhere before?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 388. Jian Fengqi didn't know why he had this thought. He was sure that he had never seen Rong Xiu's face before, but when Rong Xiu spoke, that noble, calm and somewhat languid appearance suddenly felt somewhat familiar. That was why he blurted out that question. A warm and distant smile appeared on Rong Xiu's face. "Why do you say that, young Master Jian?" "I've been recuperating at Mingyue Tianshan and have only returned to the imperial capital in the past few months. I've been living in seclusion. I don't remember seeing young Master Jian before." Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was a little hesitant. Was it really just an illusion? But he had never had such a feeling before. No matter who it was, he had a photographic memory and clearly remembered all the details of the other party. No, there was another person who made him have a similar feeling before. Chu Liyue. However, Chu Liyue at least had eyes that were extremely similar to that person, so it was normal for him to feel familiar. Didn't even Mu Qinghe think so? Even Hong Yao treated Chu Liyue differently. But Rong Xiu wasn't. This face was clearly unfamiliar to him. But that aura, haha, it seems that I remembered wrongly. But it seems that I have quite the affinity with Prince Li. As Jian Fengqi spoke, he secretly sighed in his heart. There was such a person in the imperial capital, but he didn't notice it at all before. It wasn't just him. Obviously, even the people in country Yaoqin thought that Rong Xiu was just a sickly person who couldn't even leave the residence. His Highness Prince Li was really good at hiding his strength. "I came here today for no other reason than to hear Mu Hongyu mention it unintentionally. I was curious, so I specially came to meet him. I want to see what kind of person Chu Liyue's fiancé is." Jian Fengqi's words were too straightforward and even seemed a bit provocative. But according to his status, there seemed to be nothing wrong with what he said. After all, even Emperor Zhou had to be polite to him. When Rong Xiu heard him mention Chu Liyue, his eyes flickered. You went to Vice Admiral Mu's place today. If young Master Jian wishes to see this prince, you can just inform him. This prince will specially invite young Master Jian to be a distinguished guest. Now that they were here, Prince Li's mansion might not be able to entertain them well. Jian Fengqi laughed. This young master has never liked to trouble others. I'll just take care of this small matter myself. Besides, she might not have the time today. Rong Xiu had a thought. Jian Fengqi suddenly realized something and looked at Rong Xiu with a serious expression. Shortly after, the smile at the corner of his mouth deepened and was tainted with a trace of evil. So Prince Li is trying to get information from me? Rong Xiu's expression didn't change. Jian Fengqi was a smart person, and some superficial skills couldn't be hidden from his eyes. Hence there was no need for him to pretend. Young Master Jian, please tell me where you is now. Rong Jiu returned to the imperial study and presented the ink pearl to Emperor Zhou. Emperor Zhou held the ink pearl and looked at it for a while before he knitted his brows. Do you know how to break this thing? Rong Jiu paused and said, there are 2 types of ink pearls. There are 2 ways to break the ink pearl. However, I've already tried it before and it didn't work. It was obvious that the Empress's shocking secret was hidden inside. Once it was broken, the Empress's side would most likely collapse. However, he quickly realized that this ink pearl was different from normal ink pearls. With his own abilities, he couldn't break the contents at all. There seems to be a special seal on this ink pearl, but I'm useless and can't recognize it. Emperor Zhou stared at the ink pearl and fell into deep thought. If even you can't do it, I'm afraid it's a little troublesome. Rong Jiu had many years of experience in the military, so he should be the best at dealing with such things. However, even he couldn't do anything about it, let alone the others. Looking at Emperor Zhou's troubled look, Rong Jiu thought for a while and said, Tian Lu is an expert from the Imperial Study Academy. Tian Lu Academy's dean, Elder Yi, is very knowledgeable. Emperor Zhou paused and shook his head. This is a serious matter, so it's better to be careful. You also have to be careful on your side and not leak any information. Yes. Doubts flashed across Rong Jiu's heart. This matter involves the Empress and the Crown Prince, so it's right for father to be careful. But isn't he being too careful? What kind of person is Elder Yi? Yet father doesn't even want to tell him. It's as if he's afraid of something. However, Rong Jiu was a smart person. Since he could tell what Emperor Zhou was thinking, he would naturally go along with it. You can leave first. Emperor Zhou put away the ink pearl, leaned against the chair and waved his hands tiredly. Rong Jiu wanted to say something but stopped himself. He wanted to take the ink pearl back and study it in detail, but he swallowed his words in the end. I'll take my leave. After leaving the palace, Rong Jiu was still thinking about the ink pearl. Father seems to value that item a lot, but if he can't crack it himself, isn't it useless? Does father have other thoughts? The more Rong Jiu thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Ever since Heptagon Alley, father's reaction has been very strange. He seemed to know something, but he kept it a secret and only told them to investigate the Empress. Now that the ink pearl incident was out, it was even more obvious. Rong Jiu was walking when he suddenly felt that someone was walking toward him. He couldn't help but look up. The person was a slender woman, but most of her face was covered by a white veil. Rong Jiu secretly knitted his brows. It's actually Chu Xianmin? She's here to find me? As expected, Chu Xianmin stopped when she was 3 steps away from him and curtsied. Greetings, third prince. Chu Xianmin? What are you doing here? Even though Rong Jiu wasn't very familiar with Chu Xianmin, he had heard quite a bit of news about her when he returned to the imperial city. Especially, she was Rong Jin's concubine. Xianmin has something to discuss with the third prince. Rong Jiu knitted his brows. What can Chu Xianmin say to me? Could it be, if you're here to plead for the crown prince, you can go back now? Chu Xianmin lightly shook her head. Third prince, you're mistaken. Even though I'm the crown prince's subordinate, I know the severity of the situation. I'm here today because I have something to tell you. I've been conflicted about this for a long time, but after thinking about it, I still think it's better to tell you. The feeling in Rongjiu's heart grew stronger. But I have a request. Please don't let anyone know that I'm the one who told you this. Zhou Xian tightly gripped the handkerchief in her hands as if she was very nervous and worried. Rongjiu said, "Okay, just say it." Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment before she lowered her voice and said, "Previously I heard the Crown Prince discussing with eldest Princess Situ. He said that he wanted her help to find a way to enter the palace and meet the Empress. It should be within these 2 days." Rongjiu's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered the strange sound he heard in the Empress's palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 389. Golden Inheritance Peak. Chu Luiyue followed Mu Qinghe forward. The surrounding forest was verdant and lush, perfectly concealing the two of them. Other than the occasional sound of the wind blowing the leaves, the surroundings were silent. Soon, a flight of stairs appeared in front of the two of them. Chu Luiyue looked up. Layers of stairs were stacked on top of each other, extending from the foot of the mountain to the top. At a glance, it was almost impossible to see the end. It was said that there were a total of 999 steps on this flight of stairs. Golden Inheritance Peak was steep, and it was imaginable how much manpower and resources were needed to build such a flight of stairs. At the top of the mountain was the place where country Yao Chen's emperor worshipped his ancestors every year. Other than the emperor, even the empress didn't have the qualifications to climb to the top of the stairs. She could only stay at the bottom and wait quietly. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but glance at Mu Qinghe in front of him. Don't tell me he wants to go to the top. Furthermore, he previously said that he wanted to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Chu Luiyue only thought of a problem now. Where is the entrance to the Imperial Mausoleum? Golden Inheritance Peak was surrounded by strict guards, and there was only one flight of stairs on the way up. The Imperial Mausoleum was buried under Golden Inheritance Peak. After walking for such a distance, she didn't find any suspicious places that could be used as an entrance. Other than the trees, there were only rocks. Mu Qinghe continued to walk up, and Chu Luiyue could only continue to follow. The two of them weren't slow, and it didn't take long for them to reach the middle of the mountain. At this point, Mu Qinghe finally turned back to look at Chu Luiyue. Other than her slightly flushed cheeks and some fine beads of sweat on her forehead, she didn't look tired at all. This was absolutely impossible for an ordinary rank 2 warrior to do. But to Chu Luiyue it didn't seem to be a difficult task. "Vice Admiral Mu, what's the matter?" Chu Luiyue saw that she had stopped and couldn't help but ask curiously. Mu Qinghe said ambiguously, "The strength of your physical body is even stronger than I had expected." Chu Luiyue coughed. She had also noticed this. Not to mention martial artists of the same level, even cultivators of a higher level than her might not be able to match her in this aspect. And this was not something that could be explained by talent. If he wanted to obtain a stronger physical body, he would have to cultivate diligently. Sometimes he would also need some natural treasures to assist him. Mu Qinghe knew this very well. Perhaps she was starting to have doubts in her heart. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about how to deal with him, he saw that he didn't say anything and continued to walk up. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything and just followed behind him at a leisurely pace. She vaguely felt that Mu Qinghe seemed to be a little anxious. Why was he in such a hurry? Time passed by bit. Chu Luiyue and Mu Qinghe finally finished half of the stairs. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled as she looked up at the mountain peak in front of her. There was actually an extremely powerful Xian formation at the top of the mountain. She didn't feel it earlier, but when she reached the last few steps, she could clearly feel that the pressure was rapidly increasing with every step she took. A trace of uneasiness faintly surfaced in her heart. However, Mu Qinghe didn't hesitate at all and stepped onto the last step. He reached the top of the mountain. The moment his foot landed, several rays of silver light instantly rose into the air. They swept towards Mu Qinghe. A cold light flashed in Mu Qinghe's hand and a long sword appeared. He quickly raised his sword and slashed down fiercely. Boom! A dull sound suddenly exploded at the top of the mountain. Bang! 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 The numerous streaks of silver light that had rushed to his body instantly dissipated. They transformed into countless rays of light. They scattered in all directions. He actually intended to forcefully break this Xian formation. The commotion at the top of the mountain immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding guards. Someone has trespassed on Golden Inheritance Peak. How is this possible? The barrier outside Golden Inheritance Peak didn't move at all. But the fluctuation just now did indeed come from the top of the mountain. As they spoke, numerous figures instantly rushed up into the air. At the same time, someone finally saw Mu Qinghe and Chu Liuyue's figures. There are two people at the top of the mountain. This caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Golden Inheritance Peak was heavily guarded. Who exactly was it that dared to silently barge in and even reach the top of the mountain? A black-robed elder shouted in a deep voice. Everyone listen up. Seal off Golden Inheritance Peak immediately. Don't let those two people escape. His deep and powerful voice reverberated mightily. Yes. The black-robed elder frowned and rushed forward, wanting to see who exactly those two people were. There weren't many people with such strength in country Yaochen, so he didn't know who was so audacious. Unfortunately, due to the cover of the forest on the mountain peak, he couldn't see the two people's faces. He could only vaguely recognize that they seemed to be a man and a woman. Boom, 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 boom. Right at this moment, a series of booming sounds came from the top of the mountain. The black-robed elder was shocked. The Xian formation on the mountain peak had actually been broken by the other party. That was a Xian formation that had been passed down for thousands of years in country Yaochen. How could it be broken so easily? The other party's strength was probably stronger than what he had imagined. Without hesitation, he took out a bamboo tube and injected some force into it. Then he suddenly threw it into the air. Boom! Bright and dazzling fireworks bloomed in the sky. At the same time, a deafening sound was heard. Chu Liyue watched as Mu Qinghe raised her sword and slashed open a path. Frenzied energy fluctuations spread in all directions, almost suffocating her. Mu Qinghe stood in the middle of the turbulence, her clothes fluttering in the wind. Right at this moment, Chu Liyue heard the shocking sound. When she looked up, she saw the huge fireworks. The other party had discovered them and was already requesting for reinforcements. Chu Liyue gritted her teeth. Then she finally took the last step and reached the top of the mountain. Just as she was about to follow Mu Qinghe, the transparent water droplet in her dantian suddenly started to spin. An indescribable summoning suddenly came from beneath her feet. Chu Liyue was shocked and immediately looked down. This power came from below the mountain. Before she could figure out what was going on, the ground beneath her feet suddenly moved. Chu Liyue looked over and realized that she had unknowingly stepped on a huge circular plate. This circular plate was embedded on the top of the mountain. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't be able to distinguish it from the ground beside it. It was only at this moment that it started to spin slowly that it became especially obvious. In the next moment, Chu Liyue's body instantly fell. Mu Qinghe sensed the movement behind her and finally turned around to take a look. She happened to see Chu Liyue's figure disappear into the circular plate. A strange light flashed across her eyes. In the next moment, she jumped without hesitation. When the black-robed elder rushed over, he realized that there was a huge circular plate on the top of the mountain that was slowly rotating. He was shocked. The Imperial Mausoleum had actually been activated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 390. Chu Liyue's body kept falling. Her surroundings were dark and she couldn't see anything. She could only hear the whistling of the wind. She tried to circulate her force, but she realized that the force in her body seemed to be suppressed and it flowed very slowly. The surrounding air became more and more viscous, as if she had fallen into a swamp. Her falling speed also gradually slowed down. After an unknown amount of time, she finally landed on the solid ground. She looked around and groped her way up. The ground under her feet was cold and very smooth, as if it was paved with jade. She pursed her lips. There was no light source here, so she had no idea what was going on here. She had to think of something. She suddenly thought of something and raised her hand. A cluster of crimson-red smoke suddenly appeared in his palm. However, before Chu Liyue could smile, the flames were quickly extinguished. The surroundings fell into darkness again. Chu Liyue frowned. She had almost forgotten that she couldn't use her force here, so she naturally couldn't summon her force to transform into flames. She stood on the spot for a while without moving. She only pricked up her ears and listened carefully to the movements around her. Drip, drip. The sound of water dripping could be heard. Chu Liyue subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound. Although she still couldn't see anything, the sound of water inexplicably made her feel more at ease. But the next moment her heart suddenly hung in the air. It had been a while since she fell, so why hadn't she seen Mu Qinghe yet? She remembered that when she fell, Mu Qinghe was following her closely. But no. Where was he? Moreover, what was even stranger was that below Golden Inheritance Peak was Country Yaochen's Imperial Mausoleum. Why would there be the sound of water in the Imperial Mausoleum? Just as Chu Liyue was deep in thought, she felt a weight on her shoulder. Dumpling came over. Unlike before, Dumpling seemed to be a little nervous as it nestled on her shoulder motionlessly. Chu Liyue sensed its emotions and felt strange. Dumpling had always been bold. Even when facing the level 7 black-winged sky-swallowing python, she did not shrink back. She even dared to curse at the legendary three-eyed eagle. She had always been fearless. What happened this time? Chu Liyue patted its head to comfort it. Dumpling grabbed her clothes and snuggled up to her tightly. Suddenly Chu Liyue had an idea. With a thought, something suddenly appeared in her palm. Heavenly Square Cauldron. This thing was small and exquisite, so it fit perfectly in her palm. And inside, the transparent karmic fire was burning. There was only a black shadow in the middle. That was the soul of the legendary three-eyed eagle. The surroundings were instantly illuminated by the flames. Chu Liyue's lips curved up. It really works. Since this heavenly square sacred cauldron could suppress a divine beast, it must be extremely powerful. Chu Liyue thought that perhaps the hellfire inside could resist the suppression here. The result was as expected. After a moment, the legendary three-eyed eagle's incredulous voice was heard. Why, you actually used the heavenly square sacred cauldron to light up the place. Because of the shock, its voice was trembling slightly. It never expected that the first time it officially left Chu Liyue's dantian would be in such a situation. Does Chu Liyue know what the heavenly square sacred cauldron is? Yes. Make the best use of it. Chu Liyue did not care at all, and her voice was light. The legendary three-eyed eagle was speechless. Chu Liyue ignored it and looked around. The surroundings were empty. There was actually nothing. But the ground was actually paved with green and white jade. Chu Liyue was slightly shocked. Green and white jade was very precious, but it was actually used to pave the ground here. And it seemed that it was not only used in this small area. Just this alone was worth more than a city. Country Yaochen actually used so much money to build the Imperial Mausoleum. It was really generous. I really don't know what it will be like inside. Chu Liyue carefully felt the subtle calling and finally chose a direction and walked forward. In the silent space, Chu Liyue's footsteps were exceptionally clear. Gradually, the sound of water dripping seemed to become louder. Chu Liyue held the heavenly square sacred cauldron tightly in his hand and continued walking forward. Bang! Accompanied by a dull collision, the mace in the black-robed elder's hand finally could not withstand it and cracked. He anxiously threw the broken mace to the side and looked at the disc that was still spinning in front of him. It was not damaged at all. His face was filled with sorrow. Elder Zhongqi, this disc was personally forged by the ancestor. Ordinary items can't open it at all. That's right. Let's find another way. If it really doesn't work, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for His Majesty to come personally. The few people standing at the side finally could not help but speak. Zhongqi shouted in annoyance. Of course I know this. He had been guarding this place for decades. How could he not know this? But if they did not think of a solution as soon as possible, how were they going to explain it to His Majesty? Under heavy guard, someone actually trespassed into Golden Inheritance Peak and even climbed to the top to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. It would not be enough even if all of them died 100 times. Wait. If we really wait for His Majesty to come, everyone here will have to bear the consequences. The few of them looked at each other and fell silent. Zhongqi stared at the disc hatefully. Did anyone see the appearance of those two people just now? No one answered. Zhongqi closed his eyes. He was the fastest to rush over at that time. Even he did not see them, let alone the others. Everyone stay here and guard it. I don't believe that they won't come out. Huge fireworks bloomed in the sky above the imperial city. Zhou Xian's eyes narrowed as an extremely cold murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Mu Qinghe actually brought you, to the imperial mausoleum. He immediately said. Young Master Jian, I still have something to deal with. I'll take my leave first today. After saying that, he lifted his feet and left. Jian Fengqi was stunned for a moment before he raised his head to look at the sky. What kind of signal was that just now? From the looks of it, the commotion caused was not small. He thought of something and the corners of his mouth curled up into an impudent smile. Prince Li, are you going to the place where the fireworks are released? It just so happens that I have nothing to do. How about I go with you? Zhou Xian suddenly looked back and quietly glanced at Jian Fengqi. In an instant, a biting cold and terrifying murderous intent swept toward Jian Fengqi. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 391. Jian Fengqi's body tensed up instinctively. Force quickly gathered in his palm. But in the next moment, the murderous intent disappeared inexplicably, as if it had never appeared. Zhou Xian smiled faintly. Please help yourself, young Master Jian. Then he turned around and left without hesitation. Jian Fengqi stood rooted to the ground for a while. What happened just now? At that moment he only felt a strong murderous intent erupt from Zhou Xian, but it disappeared so quickly that he almost thought that he had seen wrongly. But how could he make a mistake on such a matter? Looking at Zhou Xian's disappearing figure, Jian Fengqi raised his eyebrows slightly. This Prince Li seems to be more unfathomable than I imagined. He turned around and looked at the fireworks in the sky. There was only one last trace of fireworks left. Everyone in the imperial capital could see it clearly. No matter who sent this signal, something big must have happened. Jian Fengqi touched his chin. Could it really be that Mu Qinghe caused the commotion? Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little interested. Previously, when Mu Qinghe wanted to come to country Yaochen, he felt that it was a little strange. Even if the higher-ups ordered to find a genius with an Earth-class Yuan Meridian with Mu Qinghe's status, there was no need for her to do it personally. She could just send someone to do it. But Mu Qinghe still came. And these few days Mu Qinghe had been leaving early and returning late. He had no idea what she was doing. Thinking of this, he simply turned around and headed in that direction. Chu Luiyue held the heavenly square cauldron in her hand and slowly moved forward in the darkness. After walking for some time, she finally saw a wall. Chu Luiyue looked up to take a closer look and realized that it was really a dead end. The greenish-black stone wall completely blocked the path ahead. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Could it be that she had walked into a dead end? However, she soon realized that the sound of water droplets was coming from the stone wall in front of her. She moved closer and saw that there was a small semicircular hole above the stone wall. A metal cylinder poked out at an angle. Water droplets were flowing out from it, dripping down drop by drop. Patter. Patter. In the quiet space, the sound of water droplets was particularly clear. Chu Luiyue looked down and saw a shallow groove at the bottom of the stone wall. A bay of water quietly flowed within. Chu Luiyue looked to both sides and found that the groove extended all the way into the darkness, with no end in sight. She raised the heavenly square cauldron again. This time she finally saw clearly that there seemed to be some kind of pattern drawn around the metal cylinder. Perhaps it was because of the passage of time, but the content on it could no longer be seen clearly. Only a vague outline was left. Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while, but he was still unable to determine what it was. He could only put it aside for the time being. The most important thing at the moment was to find a way to leave this place. Chu Luiyue knocked on the stone wall and found that it was indeed solid and extraordinarily thick. It was definitely not something that she could break open by force alone. Then she carefully checked it again but did not find any mechanism. Could it be that she could only go back the way she came? Chu Luiyue frowned. She clearly felt that there was something behind the stone wall that was attracting her. She was unwilling to give up just like that. Besides, even if she went back, how was she going to return to the top of the mountain? Not to mention that she could not fly now. Even if she could, this strange space suppression would prevent her from using it. Patter. Patter. The water droplets fell at a very uniform speed. Chu Luiyue looked at the metal cylinder again. If the water was flowing out from inside, then What kind of scene was it inside? All of a sudden Tuanzi jumped onto the metal cylinder. Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. Dumpling. You can't bite this casually. Who knew what was going on in the Imperial Mausoleum? If they rashly destroyed the stone wall, it might cause trouble. There had always been many things to pay attention to in the mausoleum, especially in the Imperial Mausoleum. Could be said that it was filled with traps. Chu Liyue did not want to lose her life here. Dumpling shook its head, a look of disdain in its eyes. I have a lot of requirements, okay? Why would I just bite anything I see? Then Dumpling pointed at the metal cylinder under its feet and hugged it with its claws. Chu Liyue suddenly understood. You want me to turn this thing? Dumpling immediately nodded excitedly. Chu Liyue hesitated. This thing shouldn't be moved, right? Although she said that, she still stretched out her hand. The metal cylinder was cold to the touch, and a chill instantly spread to the bottom of her heart. Chu Liyue held her breath and focused, gently turning it. Crack. The metal cylinder actually moved. Chu Liyue suppressed the shock in her heart and slowly turned it along with the force. When the metal cylinder turned 180 degrees, Chu Liyue finally heard a crisp sound. It seemed to be the sound of the built-in buckle fitting. Chu Liyue let go of her hand, and in the next moment on the stone wall in front of her, golden starlight suddenly appeared. Those starlight were like stars in the dark night, bright and dazzling. Chu Liyue raised her hand to cover her eyes, but from the corner of her eye, she saw that the golden starlight gradually connected into a line. Then a huge and strange pattern was drawn. Chu Liyue was shocked. This was clearly the blurry pattern she saw earlier. At this moment the light lit up and the outline gradually became clear. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be tightly grasped by something, and she stared at it without blinking. That was, boom. Before she could see it clearly, the stone wall suddenly split from the middle of the metal cylinder. A dazzling white light shot out from it. Chu Liyue's eyes instantly turned white. Dumpling jumped back onto her shoulder and grabbed her clothes tightly. After a while, the surrounding movements gradually quieted down. Chu Liyue also gradually adapted to the white light, and she focused her eyes to look inside. When she saw the scene in front of her, she finally couldn't help but gasp. He saw a wide river flickering with silver light flowing through the sky. The starlight in the river shone brightly, illuminating the entire space. Just now, when Chu Liyue opened the stone wall, the white light she felt came from here. Chu Liyue opened her eyes wide in shock. That river floated in the air, clear and clean, but also shining brightly. At a glance it looked like the Milky Way in the dark night. Dazzling and magnificent. At the bottom of the river there was a spacious square. A lonely golden throne was quietly placed in the center. However, that wasn't what shocked Chu Liyue the most. That was because a man was sitting on that golden throne. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 392. There was actually someone in the Imperial Mausoleum that had been sealed for thousands of years. Chu Liyue was shocked. At the same time she quickly sized up the man. After seeing him clearly, she realized that something was wrong. This man did not seem to be a living person. He was tall and wore a black robe with golden dragon patterns embroidered on his chest and cuffs. He looked noble and dignified. At a glance, this man was about 40 years old, but he was elegant and had an outstanding temperament. It could still be seen that when he was young he must have been a rare handsome man. It was just that his eye sockets were actually pure black. Chu Liyue could not help but stare at those eyes. They were two dark vortexes. On the surface they looked calm and peaceful, but in the depths, one could see the changes of life and death and the disappearance of stars. Who are you? The man looked at Chu Liyue and slowly asked in a deep voice. Chu Liyue's mind suddenly became drowsy. Waves of fatigue surged up and her entire mind seemed to relax. Chu Liyue. She replied in a low voice. The large space suddenly quieted down. After a moment the man asked again. No, you are not Chu Liyue. His voice seemed to carry some kind of indescribable power. It fell heavily in her ears and reached the bottom of her heart. Chu Liyue shook her head. Her voice was firm. I am Chu Liyue. This body, this appearance, if she was not Chu Liyue, who was she? The man suddenly laughed as if he had heard a joke. Look up. Chu Liyue looked up and saw the slowly flowing river across the sky. Countless stars were reflected in her eyes, making her look resplendent. Suddenly those lights dissipated. The river swayed and a scene seemed to appear in front of her. Chu Liyue's brows furrowed. It was a cliff. On the cliff that extended from the cliff, there was an octagonal pavilion. The white mountain mist drifted here and there, adding a bit of spiritual energy to this precipitous land. In the octagonal pavilion, a black-clothed man stood with his hands behind his back. The mountain wind blew, lifting up the corners of his clothes. He looked like an immortal who was about to fly away with the wind. Chu Liyue looked at his back and felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She seemed to have seen this person before. When she saw the cliff and the octagonal pavilion, she didn't feel any sense of unfamiliarity. It was as if she had already been there. There seemed to be something surging at the bottom of her heart, as if it was about to break out, but she couldn't make it clear. This made her feel like her heart was in a mess, adding to her anxiety for no reason. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to call out the black-clothed man's name. But she seemed to have become a mute, unable to make a sound. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in the bottom of her heart, making her extremely anxious. Chu Liyue anxiously wanted to speak, but just as he managed to spit out a word, he saw the black-clothed man suddenly turn sideways. Chu Liyue suddenly paused and stared intently. However, just as she was about to see the man's face, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her hand. Chu Liyue was jolted awake. Looking down, she realized that Dumpling had bitten her hand hard. Dark red blood gradually seeped out of the wound, waking her up completely. What happened to her just now? She actually fell into the other party's dangerous situation so easily. Dumpling, thank you. Just now I almost, Chu Liyue said softly but suddenly stopped. Almost what? Why was she rejoicing in the depths of her heart? This feeling rarely appeared to her. Usually she would only feel this way when she was trying to avoid making a big mistake. But, in that situation just now, although her mental defenses were almost broken, it didn't seem to have anything to do with her biggest secret. Why did she have the illusion that she had survived a disaster? Chu Liyue looked up again. The suspended river had returned to its original state, and the scene on it had completely disappeared as if it had never appeared. Including that cliff, that octagonal pavilion, and that man. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. She was so eager to see the man's appearance. This had never happened before. She suppressed the waves in her heart, clenched her fists and looked at the man on the throne. Do you think that you can trap me with such an illusion? The black-clothed man's face revealed a meaningful smile. Do you think that was an illusion? Chu Liyue's heart sank. All the scenes that appeared in the weak water came from your memory. Whatever you are thinking, it will naturally reflect what you are thinking. A low and slow voice sounded and every word was like a clap of thunder. Chu Liyue's body tensed up. If that was the case, the scene she saw just now was real. But in her past life and present life, there was no such scene in the memory of her two lives. I don't even know your identity, how can I believe what you say? Chu Liyue sneered. I can be sure that I have never seen that scene. Your method of lying is a little too clumsy. But are you really sure? The man seemed unmoved and calmly continued to ask. Chu Liyue's heart jumped and she secretly gritted her teeth. Rationally, she believed that every word she said was correct, because she really did not remember that scene. However, in the depths of her heart, there was a faint uncertainty. Because everything she saw just now had an indescribable sense of familiarity. Especially the man standing with his hands behind his back. She only saw a back view but had the urge to call his name. If she really had not seen it before, how could this be? You don't know my identity, but I know who you are. The black-clothed man raised his eyes, staring at Chu Liyue with a confident smile. It was as if everything was under his control. Who exactly are you? Chu Liyue shouted in a deep voice. You will naturally know when you find me. The man said and suddenly stood up. I'll wait for you. Then, without waiting for Chu Liyue to react, his figure instantly turned into countless silver stars and flew into the river in midair. Without a trace. Chu Liyue came back to her senses after a while. That black-clothed man, left just like that. He said that he would find him. Where could she find him? She couldn't possibly enter that river too, right? On one hand, she couldn't go up at all. On the other hand, who knew what would happen if she entered? Chu Liyue pondered for a moment, and finally decided to continue forward, heading towards the throne in the middle. Other than the throne, there was nothing else here. If she couldn't find any clues on it, then she would really have a headache. Chu Liyue walked step by step and finally stood in front of the throne. Suddenly, her eyes focused and she carefully stared at the back of the throne. In the middle position there was a line of words, "East of the weak water, gold." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 393. In the Palace. Rongjio took big strides toward the imperial study. All the palace maids he met on the way greeted him respectfully. Now that the crown prince and empress were under house arrest, His Majesty had handed many things to the third prince. Everyone could tell that the imperial city was about to change. But seeing Rongjio's tense face, the palace maids didn't dare to say anything as if something important had happened. Rongjio walked quickly and he was frustrated. No matter how much I calculated, I didn't realize that Xianxia was also in the Empress's palace back then. If I was more careful back then, I would have definitely noticed something amiss. Perhaps I could have walked forward and pulled the screen aside to discover Xianxia. But I didn't. Things had been going too smoothly these few days, so I was so careless that I forgot about this person's existence. At first I didn't care about it, but thinking about it now, I feel that there's something fishy going on. Xianxia and Rongjin had a marriage agreement, but she didn't ask to cancel it even after Rongjin got into trouble. What else could it be if she didn't have a motive? Xianxia must know something, so she's willing to help the Empress and Rongjin. I actually didn't think of checking on Xianxia before this. Before he reached the imperial study, Rongjio heard hurried footsteps in front of him. He looked up and saw Emperor Zhou, who was walking at the very front. Emperor Zhou's expression was dark and vicious, which he had never seen before, and it had an intense murderous aura. Rongjio was shocked. What's going on now? Greetings, father. Rongjio quickly walked forward and bowed. Emperor Zhou saw Rongjio and knitted his brows. Why are you still in the palace? At this time Rongjio should have left the palace. Rongjio immediately said, Father, I'm sorry. Imperial father, I have returned because I have something important to tell you immediately. Emperor Zhou didn't stop and continued walking forward. Wait for me to come back. As he spoke, he had already walked past Rongjio. Rongjio was dazed. What's going on? Father, I really have something urgent. Third prince, you should wait first. Eunuch Min walked to Rongjio's side, waved his horsetail whisk and persuaded him. Can't you see how anxious His Majesty is right now? In short, His Majesty is definitely not in the mood to listen to what you have to say. Please wait patiently for now. Rongjio asked suspiciously. Eunuch Min, please give me some pointers. The Imperial father seems to be in a hurry. What exactly is he going to do? You still don't know. Eunuch Min blurted out in shock. He quickly looked around, pointed to the sky and said in a low voice, That's right. You didn't see the commotion just now? Rongjio was dazed for a moment before he understood. That's news from the Imperial Mausoleum. How could His Majesty not be anxious? Eunuch Min slapped his thigh. This old servant has to leave now. Your Highness, you should do as you see fit. Eunuch Min then immediately chased after Emperor Zhou. Rongjio stood rooted to the ground as his heart stirred. After his conversation with Zhou Xian, he was filled with shock, anger, and regret. He didn't have time to think before he returned to the palace. When he walked on the road, he also noticed the gigantic firework. Of course, he knew that it was used to send messages, but he didn't realize that it was a warning from the Imperial Mausoleum because all his attention was on Xianxia. This meant that something had happened to the Imperial Mausoleum. Even though Rongjio wasn't in the Imperial City most of the time, he knew that Golden Inheritance Peak, where the Imperial Mausoleum was, had always been heavily guarded. Now that they suddenly received this news, they must have met with big trouble. It would be strange if Emperor Zhou wasn't anxious. Just as Rongjio was thinking about whether he should go back to the Empress's palace to take a look and confirm if Xianxia had gone there, Emperor Zhou, who had just left, was stopped by someone again. This time the person who came was a guard in armor. He rushed all the way here with a panicked expression as he directly knelt in front of Emperor Zhou and miserably shouted, "Your Highness! Your Majesty! Bad news!" Emperor Zhou felt that his head was heavily hammered and his head hurt. Bad news. Something has happened to the Imperial Mausoleum. What could be worse than this? Speak, hollered Emperor Zhou as he was forced to stand still. That guard knelt on the floor and his body shivered. Your Majesty, Her Majesty. Her Majesty has passed away. The surroundings suddenly fell into dead silence. Emperor Zhou's expression froze. Upon hearing this, Rongjio looked up and saw that the guard was indeed the person in charge of guarding the Empress's palace. Did he just say that the Empress has passed away? An ominous feeling surged in Rongjio's heart. He hurriedly walked to that guard's side. What did you just say? Say it again. That guard was shocked by his sudden questioning as he shivered and said with a trembling voice, Her Majesty, Her Majesty, Her Majesty, killed herself. Useless. Emperor Zhou finally reacted as he harshly kicked that guard's heart. Didn't I say that no matter what, I have to take good care of the Empress? It wouldn't be enough even if the Empress died 1,000 times for what she did. However, he still had many things that he hadn't asked clearly. Now that she suddenly died, what should he do next? What exactly did you do? That guard endured the pain as he fearfully said, Your Majesty, we've been guarding outside the palace. Your Majesty, we've been standing guard outside and will go in to check every hour. But Her Majesty actually hit the wall for some reason. When we heard the commotion, Her Majesty was already. Actually, we're also very wronged. The Empress has been in the same state for the past few days. Even if she's going through excruciating torture, she's still holding on. Who would have thought that she would suddenly kill herself? She was determined and she hit the wall very harshly. Her face and head were all covered in blood, and her skull was about to split open. How could we have predicted this? Emperor Zhou was already anxious because of what happened to the Imperial Mausoleum. Now that he heard this news, he felt the blood in his chest rumble as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Your Majesty! Father! Eunuch Min and Rongjio immediately gasped. Eunuch Min was originally standing beside Emperor Zhou, and he hurriedly supported his shaky body. Your Majesty! You must take care of your body. Under the contrast of the blood at the corner of his lips, Emperor Zhou's face looked even paler. He stared at that guard with a deadly gaze and enunciated every word clearly. Who went to the Empress's palace today? I'm certain that the Empress didn't suddenly commit suicide. There must be a deeper reason behind this. A thought suddenly flashed across Rongjio's mind. Could it be? Zhou Xian, that guard's voice trembled. Why, Your Majesty, today, only the third prince went to the Empress's palace alone. Rongjio was shocked. He suddenly turned to look at that guard. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 394. That guard didn't dare to look up at Rongjio as he quickly continued speaking. The third prince entered the palace and seemed to have an argument with the Empress. However, we didn't dare to barge in, so we waited outside. Not long after the third prince left, the Emperor Zhou looked at Rongjio coldly. Rongjio went to see the Empress today and found the ink pearl. It's normal for him to fight with the Empress. But why would the Empress suddenly want to die? Could it really be related to Rongjio? Rongjio's heart sank. Emperor Zhou is indeed suspecting me. That guard's words just now were too persuasive. He clearly did it on purpose. Rongjio boomed. Imperial Father, I can swear that this matter has nothing to do with me. Other than me, there's another person who went to the Empress's palace today. Emperor Zhou immediately asked, Who? Rongjio took a deep breath in. Zhou Xian. Surprise flashed across Emperor Zhou's eyes. Zhou Xian? Why is she here? Emperor Zhou immediately looked at that guard. Did Zhou Xian go to the Empress's palace today? The guard shook his head. Nope. His expression was sincere and he didn't look like he was lying. The uneasiness in Rongjio's heart intensified. He raised his voice and his tone became much harsher as he shouted at that guard. Do you know that lying to His Majesty is a capital offense? The guard seemed to be startled and shrank back a little. I don't dare to lie to Your Majesty. Everything I said before is true. Rongjio felt suffocated. When he entered the Empress's palace, he didn't ask if anyone else came. Back then he didn't discover Situ Xingqian in time. Now that the Empress is dead, Situ Xingqian must have left. If this guard insists, no, that group of guards all say the same thing, then I can't find any evidence to prove that Situ Xingqian was there. Suddenly he thought of something. Father, you can send someone to check the palace entrance records. Situ Xingqian must have come to the palace today. Emperor Zhou looked at eunuch Min. Immediately send someone to check. Yes. Then Emperor Zhou took a deep breath. Lock down the Empress's palace immediately. No one is allowed to come near except for me. Also seal off the news. This gets out. He didn't finish his words, but the threat in his eyes was clear. Then Emperor Zhou turned around and planned to head to the Imperial Mausoleum. After taking 2 steps, his body swayed and he almost fell. Eunuch Min quickly caught her and couldn't help but say, Your Majesty, why don't you rest in the palace for a while? Your current body. Emperor Zhou shook his head, clenched his teeth and walked forward. What kind of place was the Imperial Mausoleum? That was the burial ground of country Yao Chen's ancestors. If something really happened that could not be salvaged, then he would become a sinner for all eternity. For so many years, the Imperial Mausoleum had never had any abnormalities. That was why the warning fireworks had frightened him so much. The death of the Empress was also a big deal, especially when there were still many unsolved mysteries. But that still couldn't be compared to the Imperial Mausoleum. Rongjio took 2 steps forward. Father, why don't I go with you? Emperor Zhou rejected him without even turning his head. No need. Go back and stay there. Put down the things in your hands first. When I come back I'll settle it. Father. Rongjio still wanted to defend himself, but Emperor Zhou clearly didn't want to hear it. Eunuch Min shot Rongjio a look, telling him not to anger His Majesty at this time. Helpless, Rongjio could only stop in his tracks and watch as Emperor Zhou's figure disappeared in front of him. He could still vaguely hear Emperor Zhou and Eunuch Min's conversation. Have you informed Elder Yi? Don't worry, Your Majesty. Elder Yi has already received the news, and I believe he's already heading to the Imperial Mausoleum. With Elder Yi around, you don't have to be too worried. The voice gradually became softer until it couldn't be heard. Rongjio slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves as he turned to look at that guard. A murderous intent that was filled with a thick blood aura enveloped the guard. Third Prince, please calm down. That guard clearly sensed the danger as he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Calm down. Rongjio's lips curved up into a mocking smile. You framed me to this extent, and you still dare to ask I to calm down? Speak. Who told you to say this? That guard didn't admit it. Third Prince, I didn't lie and I didn't frame you. You've really misunderstood. Misunderstood? Then Situ Xingqian going to the Empress's palace today was also a misunderstanding? Seeing that Rongjio's aura was getting scarier, that guard guiltily shifted his gaze away and said very softly, Third Prince, I've already said it several times. Your Highness, this humble one has already said it many times. Today, other than you, no one else has entered the Empress Palace. Why don't you believe me? His Majesty has already ordered for a thorough investigation. If you don't believe me, you can personally ask around and see if anyone in the palace saw eldest Princess Situ enter the palace today. Won't everything be clear then? Hearing this, Rongjio suddenly reacted. No. Since he dared to deny it in front of everyone and even dared to take the initiative to ask someone to investigate, it must be because he made sufficient preparations. Or perhaps the other party dug a hole for me to jump into. Rongjio's heart was filled with deep hatred and hatred. I didn't expect Situ Xingqian's methods to be so terrifying. Perhaps, even the Empress's death has something to do with her. Rongjio originally wanted to go to the Empress's palace to personally see what was going on, but Emperor Zhou had already ordered him to go back, so he naturally couldn't do anything. He bent down, grabbed that guard's collar and said word by word, Today I'll pay you back. I will remember today's score. Princely Mansion. After Rongjio got rid of Jian Fengqi, he planned to quickly rush to the Imperial Mausoleum. Yuemo followed closely behind. Seeing that he was planning to leave like this, he finally couldn't help but ask, Master, are you going to leave? Master, are you going just like this? Rongxiu paused. Since something happened in the Imperial Mausoleum, many people would definitely head there. Especially Emperor Zhou. If they saw that Prince Li, who should be resting in his residence, also appeared in the Imperial Mausoleum, I wonder how they would react. Rongxiu closed his eyes. I was too anxious, so I actually forgot such a simple thing. Once he thought of your being in the Imperial Mausoleum, his heart seemed to be suspended in midair. He was filled with anxiety and torment, and he couldn't wait to run over immediately. He turned around and glanced at you. Go and inform Yengu. He naturally knows what to do. Yes. But, Master, your side. I know what I'm doing. I understand. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 395. Along with this loud noise, the ground around the throne actually cracked open. With the throne as the center, the cracks spread out in all directions. Then something gushed out from the cracks. Chu Liwei looked over and realized that it was actually golden sand. Countless grains of sand that glowed with a faint golden light gushed out from the ground like spring water. However, these grains of sand didn't spread out in all directions. Instead, they gradually accumulated upwards. Chu Liwei realized that those weren't real grains of sand, but crystal fragments. Those tiny crystal fragments gradually gathered together and formed a strange pentagonal crystal that was the size of a fingernail. And these pentagonal crystals were connected to each other and accumulated layer by layer. The thin crystals weren't all tightly connected. On the contrary, most of them were spaced apart as if they were formed according to some strange law. Soon, a golden fence-like crystal wall appeared in front of Chu Liwei. Not only this one. The same scene was playing out in the cracks at the side. Chu Liwei knew that she couldn't continue to sit and wait for death. Otherwise, when the golden crystal wall accumulated, it would be several times more difficult for her to get out. She immediately stood up, intending to leave the throne. However, the moment she stood up, all the movements around her suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had pressed the button to stop time, stopping everything. Chu Liwei paused and her expression turned serious. Then she cautiously took a step forward. Buzz. A faint buzzing sound was suddenly heard. The void in front of her suddenly rippled. Streaks of golden lines spread out like water ripples before disappearing completely. However, Chu Liwei was greatly shocked. There was actually an additional barrier here. Moreover, from the probing just now, this barrier was absolutely not something that she could break through at her current level. She looked to the side and tried twice. Sure enough, the entire throne was shrouded in a sealed enchantment. Chu Liwei sat back on the throne. Everything around her immediately returned to normal. The sound of fine sand flowing could be heard. The bright golden light illuminated the entire space as if it was 100 suns. However, Chu Liwei's heart gradually sank to the bottom. Looking around, the walls made of thin golden crystals were already taller than a person. Overall, it looked like a zigzagging maze. And she was trapped in the middle of this maze. Bang! Tuanzi suddenly jumped out and rushed straight to the bounded domain. With a muffled sound, Dumpling was bounced back. Chu Liwei caught it with her sharp eyes. Dumpling rubbed her head. It hurts. Dumpling, are you all right? Chu Liwei asked worriedly. Tuanzi didn't give up. She got up and flew towards the boundary again. At the same time, she opened her mouth and fiercely. Crack. The corner of Chu Liwei's eyes twitched. The sound. Why does it sound a little wrong? Seeing that Dumpling seemed to be stuck to the barrier and didn't move at all, Chu Liwei couldn't help but shout, Dumpling. Dumpling still didn't react, but Chu Liwei saw that its tail trembled slightly. She became more and more worried. She reached out and grabbed Dumpling. Dumpling immediately covered its face with its claws. Chu Liwei pushed its claws away. What's wrong, you? Her voice stopped abruptly. The human and the beast looked at each other. In order to alleviate the awkwardness, Dumpling bared its teeth and smiled. Looking at Dumpling's little white teeth that were dyed red, Chu Liwei was silent for a moment. Did you break your teeth? Dumpling hurriedly covered its mouth and shook its head desperately. Oh no. It was just that I bit too hard, my teeth were a little loose and I bled a little. Chu Liwei was speechless. She sighed helplessly and patted Dumpling's head gently. Then she looked at the faint golden barrier in front of her. She knew how powerful Dumpling's teeth were, But now even Dumpling couldn't do anything about this barrier. With her current strength, how could she get out? Chu Liyue frowned and pondered for a long time. She subconsciously leaned back. Her back suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Oh right, she almost forgot that there were words on the back of the backrest. Wait. Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly lit up. What was written on it just now? East of the weak water, metal. Metal, heaven and earth were chaotic and the 5 elements were born. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Could it be that this metal referred to the 5 elements? The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. Among them, fire could restrain metal. She placed Dumpling on her shoulder and took out the heavenly square cauldron again. The transparent karmic fire burned quietly inside. Then Chu Liyue held her breath and focused all her attention and energy on the heavenly square cauldron. The fire moved according to his heart. With a hong sound, the transparent karmic fire instantly rose up. It pounced toward the barrier. Whoosh! The two met and let out an ear-piercing sound. That faintly golden barrier actually started to burn. While Chu Liyue was dealing with all kinds of situations in the Imperial Mausoleum, it was peaceful outside Golden Inheritance Peak. Xianxia and the rest stood at the top of the mountain and stared at the slowly rotating circular plate with gloomy expressions. Ever since the two of them disappeared, there were no more movements. They couldn't enter the Imperial Mausoleum from this circular plate and could only watch it rotate from the side. There was nothing they could do. No one knew what the situation in the Imperial Mausoleum was like. The quieter it was, the more uneasy they felt. Suddenly, the sound of something cutting through the air was heard. Xianxia immediately looked up. When he saw who it was, he immediately went forward happily. Old Man Yi. It was Yi Zhiding. He was originally repairing Jiuyou Tower in the academy when he suddenly saw the warning fireworks. He knew that something had happened in the Imperial Mausoleum, so he rushed over. Yi Zhiding was about to speak when he saw the circular plate slowly rotating at the top of the mountain. He couldn't help but be shocked. The Imperial Mausoleum has been activated? Xianxi's lips moved and he lowered his head. Old Man Yi, please forgive us. It's all because of our incompetence. That's why those two people took advantage of the loophole. Yi Zhiding's expression was solemn. 2 people? Have you confirmed their identities? Xianxi looked ashamed. We couldn't. They moved too quickly. By the time we discovered them, they were already at the top of the mountain and had directly activated the Imperial Mausoleum. We didn't have time. Yi Zhiding was even more confused. How is this possible? Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier can't be opened without the key. How did they enter silently? Xianxi and the rest fell silent. Yi Zhiding suddenly paused. Could it be that those 2 people have the key to Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier? But there's only one key and it's always been in His Majesty's hands. Someone stole His Majesty's key. Digression. The chapter number is wrong. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 396. In the Palace. Rongjio strode quickly towards the imperial study. Along the way, the palace servants greeted him respectfully. Now that the Crown Prince and the Empress were under house arrest, His Majesty had delegated many tasks to His Royal Highness. Everyone could see that the situation in the capital was about to change. However, when they saw Rongjio's tense expression, they did not dare to say anything. Rongjio walked quickly, his heart full of regret. Despite all his calculations, he did not notice that Xinxian was also in the Empress's palace at that time. If he had been more careful at that time, he would definitely have noticed that something was wrong. Or if he had taken a step forward and pulled open the screen, he would have found Xinxian. However, he did not. Things had been progressing too smoothly in the past few days, so much so that he had forgotten about the existence of this person. At first he did not pay much attention to it, but now that he thought about it, he felt that there was a mystery everywhere. Xinxian and Rongjin were engaged, and even after Rongjin's accident he did not ask to cancel the engagement. If this was not a conspiracy, then what was it? Xinxian must know something, and that was why he was willing to help the Empress and Rongjin. Before this he had not thought of investigating Xinxian. Before he reached the imperial study, Rongjio suddenly heard a sudden rush of footsteps in front of him. He looked up and saw Emperor Zhou walking at the front. Emperor Zhou's expression was gloomy and fierce like he had never seen before, with a strong murderous aura. Rongjie was shocked. What had happened this time? Greetings, father. Rongjie quickly stepped forward and bowed. When Emperor Zhou saw Rongjie, he frowned. Why are you still in the palace? At this time Rongjie should have already left the palace. Rongjie immediately said, Father, I have returned because I have something important to tell you immediately. Emperor Zhou did not stop and continued to walk forward. Whatever it is, wait for me to come back. As he spoke, he had already passed by Rongjie. Rongjie was stunned. What was going on? Father, I really have an urgent matter. Oh, your highness, please wait for a while. Eunuch Min walked to Rongjie and waved the horsetail whisk in his hand, trying to persuade her. Don't you see how anxious His Majesty is? Anyway, His Majesty is definitely not in the mood to listen to what you have to say. Please wait patiently for the time being. Rongjie asked suspiciously, Eunuch Min, please enlighten me. Father seems to be in a hurry. What is he going to do? You still don't know. Eunuch Min blurted out in shock. He quickly looked around, pointed to the sky and said in a low voice, That's right. He lowered his voice and said, Didn't you see that movement just now? Rongjie was stunned for a moment and then understood. That news came from the mausoleum. How could His Majesty not be anxious? Eunuch Min slapped his thigh. This old servant has to leave quickly. Your Third Highness, you should do as you see fit. After that, Eunuch Min immediately chased after Emperor Zhou. Rongjie stood on the spot, his heart pounding. After talking to Zhou Xian, he was filled with shock, anger, and regret. He had returned to the palace before he could think of anything else. While walking on the road, he also noticed the huge firework. Of course, he knew that it was used to send a message, but because he was so focused on Xianxia, he did not realize that it was a warning from the direction of the mausoleum. It meant that something had happened to the mausoleum. Although Rongjie was not in the capital, he knew that the gold pillar peak where the mausoleum was located had always been heavily guarded. Now that this news had come, it must be a big problem. It would be strange if Emperor Zhou was not anxious. Just as Rongjie was pondering whether he should go back to the Empress Palace to check if Xianxia had been there, Emperor Zhou, who had just left, was intercepted again. This time the person who came was an armored guard. He had rushed all the way here and his expression was one of panic. He directly knelt in front of Emperor Zhou and cried out in panic. Your Majesty! Bad news! Emperor Zhou felt as if his head had been hit by a heavy hammer. His head was hurting. Bad news! Something had happened to the mausoleum. What could be worse than this? Speak! Zenith Emperor was forced to stand still and shouted in a deep voice. The guard knelt on the ground, his body shivering. Your Majesty, the Empress! The Empress is dead. Suddenly there was a dead silence. Emperor Zhou's expression suddenly froze. Rongjie heard the voice and looked up. He saw that the guard was indeed the one in charge of guarding the Empress Palace. Did he just say, the Empress was dead? An ominous premonition surged in Rongjie's heart. He strode quickly to the side of the guard. What did you just say? Say it again. The guard was startled by his sudden question. He shrank back a little before replying in a trembling voice, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. The Empress killed herself. Useless. Emperor Zhou finally reacted and viciously kicked the guard in the chest. Didn't I say that no matter what, we must keep an eye on the Empress? The Empress deserved to die 1,000 times for what she had done. However, there were still many things that he had not clarified. She had suddenly died. What should he do next? What the hell did you do? The guard endured the pain and said in a trembling voice. Your Majesty, we've been standing guard outside and will go in every hour to check it out. But, the Empress actually hit her head against the wall. When we heard the noise, the Empress was already. They were actually very wronged. The Empress had been in the same state for the past few days. Even though she had suffered a lot of pain, she still endured it. Who would have thought that she would suddenly change her mind? She had steeled her heart. That collision was especially hard. Her face and head were covered in blood, and her skull was almost cracked open. How could they have predicted this? Emperor Zhou was already anxious because of what happened to the mausoleum. Now that he heard the news, he felt the blood in his chest churning. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Your Majesty!" Eunuch Min and Rongjio immediately cried out. Eunuch Min was standing beside Emperor Zhou. He quickly held his father's swaying body. Eunuch Min, who was standing next to Emperor Zhou, quickly supported his tottering body. "You must take care of yourself. You must take care of your dragon body." Emperor Zhou's face looked even paler with the blood at the corner of his lips. He stared at the guard and asked, enunciating each word clearly and clearly, "Who went to the Empress's palace today?" He was sure that the Empress did not commit suicide all of a sudden. There must be a deeper reason behind it. A thought flashed across Rongjio's mind. Could it be Zhou Xian? The guard's voice trembled. "Your Majesty, today, only the third prince went to the Empress's palace." Rongjio was shocked. She turned to look at the guard. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit IAI. Chapter 397. The clear and distant cry of a crane was suddenly heard from afar. Elder Yi and the rest turned around and saw a white crane with a black neck and red head flying toward them. It was a 5th-grade fiend, a black-necked red-crowned crane. This was a fiend reared by country Yao Chen's royal family. Emperor Zhou was sitting on its back. Under normal circumstances, the royal family rarely summoned the black-necked red-crowned crane. However, something happened in the imperial mausoleum, so Emperor Zhou couldn't care less. This allowed him to rush over quickly, and he was only slightly slower than Elder Yi. Emperor Zhou already had a few guesses along the way, but his heart still sank when he saw a few figures standing at the top of Golden Inheritance Peak. Other than him, no one else had the right to come up to the top of Golden Inheritance Peak. However, so many people were gathered here and things were clearly worse than expected. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Elder Zhongqi and the rest bowed anxiously. Elder Yi was of high status, so he naturally didn't have to do this. Hence, the moment the black-necked red-crowned crane landed, Elder Yi immediately went forward and asked, "Is there any problem?" "Your Majesty, was the key to Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier stolen by someone?" Emperor Zhou jumped down from the black-necked red-crowned crane's back and was shocked. "Well, I've been keeping it well and it's with me now." Elder Yi and the rest looked at each other. "Your Majesty, are you sure?" asked Elder Yi again. Emperor Zhou raised his hand, and a strange pattern appeared on his palm. "That key is indeed still with Emperor Zhou." "What exactly happened?" "Elder Yi, why do you ask?" Emperor Zhou was also confused. Elder Yi said solemnly, "2 secret doors were opened. 2 people secretly opened the barrier of Golden Inheritance Peak and opened the Imperial Mausoleum. They have already entered. The entire process was very secretive, and Zhongqi and the rest only realized that something was amiss when they reached the peak. Hence, we suspect that they stole His Majesty's key. However, that doesn't seem to be the case now." There was too much information in this sentence, and Emperor Zhou was dazed as his voice trembled. "What? The Imperial Mausoleum has been opened." Before he could finish his sentence, he glanced from the corner of his eye and finally saw the slowly spinning circular plate not far away. Just now he had rushed over in a hurry and didn't see it. Emperor Zhou's chest seemed to be blocked by something, and he felt so stifled that he couldn't breathe. Country Yao Chen's Imperial Mausoleum had existed for thousands of years and would only open when the previous emperor passed away. But now it had been opened all of a sudden? Who is it? Emperor Zhou's face turned green, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Elder Zhongqi and the others immediately knelt down. "Your Majesty, please calm down. We didn't see the appearance of those 2 people. Your subordinates are incompetent, please punish us, Your Majesty." Emperor Zhou took a deep breath in and suppressed the anger in his heart with much difficulty. Since it had already happened, what was the point of punishing him now? "Go and find him immediately. We must find these 2 people." Elder Zhongqi and the others broke out in cold sweat. Mr. Yi sighed and helped to explain. "Your Majesty, the Imperial Mausoleum has been opened. Ordinary people are unable to enter. I'm afraid you'll have to do it yourself before we can enter." Emperor Zhou rubbed his glabella. "I forgot about this. Wait, if that's the case, how did those two people enter? The crowd fell silent. They can even open Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier. What else can't they do? The other party clearly came prepared. Emperor Zhou also thought of this and couldn't help but feel even more frustrated. He had always sent soldiers to guard Golden Inheritance Peak, but he didn't expect someone to find a loophole so easily. This is like slapping my face harshly. He walked to the circular plate and tightly knitted his brows. Other than when the previous emperor was buried, he had never seen this circular plate move. I didn't expect this to happen. Emperor Zhou took a deep breath in and slowly raised his hand. The strange pattern appeared in his palm again. A silver light suddenly flashed on the circular plate. But very quickly the light suddenly disappeared. Emperor Zhou's expression changed. I can't open the Imperial Mausoleum anymore. In the forest outside Golden Inheritance Peak, someone was quickly moving forward. It was Xianxia and Rongjin. Rongjin looked up and took a deep breath before he said, "I'm sorry. Golden Inheritance Peak is in front." Xianxia followed his gaze and looked over. Golden Inheritance Peak was still the most eye-catching one in this undulating mountain range. It was steep and had a majestic aura. Even though they were still a distance away, they could already feel the frightening suppression. She clenched her fists in her sleeves. It turns out that the barrier outside Golden Inheritance Peak is actually this strong. This is going to be troublesome. Just as she was about to continue forward, Rongjin suddenly called out to her. "Xianxia, hold on." Xianxia turned around and saw Rongjin staring at Golden Inheritance Peak with a stern face. "If you continue forward, you'll reach the periphery of Golden Inheritance Peak. You can't go any further." Xianxia didn't understand what he meant, and her eyes were filled with confusion. Rongjin explained, "There's a lot of guards there. There are usually many guards guarding that place. Now that something has happened to the Imperial Mausoleum, they must have sent more people. Perhaps Imperial Father had already arrived. Under such circumstances, you'll definitely be discovered if you go. For your safety, just wait for me here." Xianxia was stunned by his words. "I tried my best to help Rongjin escape from Crown Prince Mansion and covered him all the way here. In the end, he actually wants me to stop here and wait for him? How can this be?" Xianxia forced a smile. "Your Highness, don't worry. I won't cause you any trouble. The situation in front is unknown and it might be dangerous for you to go alone. I'll go with you." Rongjin looked hesitant. Xianxia teased him softly. "Your Highness, are you worried that I'll harm you when we reach there?" "Of course not." Rongjin immediately retorted, but his gaze wavered as if he was guilty. "I'm just worried that we'll cause unnecessary trouble if we go together. After all, I'm still the Crown Prince. It's normal for me to come here when something happened to the Imperial Mausoleum. But you, Xianxia, we haven't gotten married yet. If you're discovered, I'm afraid it won't be good." Xianxia sneered in her heart. Rongjin's words are so dignified. He couldn't have forgotten that he was still under house arrest in the Crown Prince's residence, right? If he's discovered, he won't be any better than me. I just want to go there alone. Rongjin felt that Xianxia's gaze seemed to see through everything, which made him uncomfortable. But the next moment Xianxia still said, "Then I'll wait here for you, Your Highness." Rongjin looked up and saw that Xianxia still had a light smile on her face as if she didn't notice anything. He heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. "I'll be back soon." Then he left in big strides. Xianxia looked at his back view and chuckled softly. Does he want to burn the bridge after crossing it and take everything for himself? How can there be such a good thing? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 398. "You can come out, he's already left," said Xianxia softly. Not far behind her, a ripple appeared in the air and an elder walked out. It was Elder Lian Ning. "I really don't know how Rongjin managed to sit on the Crown Prince's seat for so many years." Elder Lian Ning's tone was sarcastic. "Does he really think that he can enter the Imperial Mausoleum with his own abilities and get what he wants? After all, he's Heaven's chosen son, so he must be different from others," said Xianxia lightly. Elder Lian Ning glanced at her and smiled. "It seems like you don't think much of Rongjin's identity, Your Highness." "Of course not. I just don't think much of Rongjin. So what if he's heaven's chosen son? Rongjin might not have the luck to succeed. Elder Lian Ning turned around and looked in the direction that Rongjin disappeared in as he said in deep thought, "You're right. I really don't know how someone like Rongjin is heaven's chosen son." Situ Xingqian's lips curved up coldly. If she didn't personally hear the Empress's words and see the scene in Heptagon Alley, she wouldn't believe it either. Even though Rongjin is useless, am I not already here? Situ Xingqian lifted the strands of hair by her ear, and coldness flashed across her watery eyes. With my help he naturally doesn't have to worry. Elder Lian Ning bowed. Your Highness, what do you plan to do now? Do you want to stay here and watch or go to the Imperial Mausoleum? Said Situ Xingqian. Elder Lian Ning nodded. Elder Lian Ning understood his intention and waved his sleeves, causing a white mist to appear and encapsulate the figures of the two cultivators. The next moment the duo's figures disappeared from the spot. On the other side, Rongjin had already walked toward Golden Inheritance Peak alone. When he got closer he quickly realized that the guards here were stricter than usual. I wonder what happened in the Imperial Mausoleum. Rongjin carefully walked forward as he thought to himself. The surroundings were silent, and the further he walked, the clearer he could hear his own heartbeat. Situ Xingqian's words kept replaying in his mind. In the Imperial Tomb, there is a supreme treasure that has been passed down for thousands of years. It was said that the treasure was accidentally obtained by the ancestor of country Yaochen back then. However, because he was unable to completely unravel the secret of the treasure, no one else knew that he had such a treasure in his possession. In the end he brought it into the Imperial Mausoleum. Only the Emperor of country Yaochen has the right to know about this matter. Her Majesty the Empress didn't know about it at first. It was only until a certain year when a miracle appeared on the Golden Inheritance Peak's heavenly worship ceremony did she learn of this matter. Furthermore, she confirmed that Your Highness the Crown Prince is the chosen one and that you are destined to enter the Imperial Mausoleum one day, obtain that treasure and become its new owner. Once you obtain that treasure and decipher its secrets, you will be able to obtain heaven-defying powers. Rongjin swallowed his saliva and looked at Golden Inheritance Peak with unconcealed desire and excitement. The ability to reach the heavens. Just these 4 words were enough to excite anyone. Even though it had been a while since he heard this, Rongjin still couldn't suppress his elation every time he thought about it. He had lived for more than 20 years, but he never knew that he had such a great opportunity. Mother is too much. She actually hid it from me for so long. If I knew about this earlier I would have come long ago. Previously he had suffered consecutive blows, and he almost thought that he had no hope of turning things around. Who would have thought that he had such a trump card? Thinking of this, Rongjin actually felt dissatisfied with the Empress. Since I'm the chosen one, why didn't Mother tell me earlier? Why did she have to wait until today to tell me when I'm in such a desperate situation? Coincidentally, something happened to the Imperial Mausoleum, so it was even more inconvenient for me to enter the Imperial Mausoleum silently. Go over there and take a look. The rest of you follow me. Suddenly a group of people walked over. Rongjin immediately hid his figure carefully and he even hid his aura. At this point a crane's cry came from the sky. Rongjin knitted his brows. Father is already here? This is even more troublesome. If Situ Xingqian came with me she might have been able to lure these people away, however this was just a thought. If he did it again he would still leave Situ Xingqian there. He had always been suspicious and the matters involved were so important. No matter what, he wouldn't be at ease with her following him. After waiting at the same spot for a while and confirming that the patrolling guards had left, he then carefully moved forward. Just like this, even though it was a dangerous journey, Rongjin still successfully reached the foot of Golden Inheritance Peak. Looking at the barrier in front of him and feeling the strong suppression, Rongjin's mouth turned dry, and he couldn't help but nervously lick his lips. Then he took out a box and softly muttered, "Mother, I'm sorry. Mother, you must help me this time." After saying that, he carefully opened the box. An engraved jade seal lay quietly inside. He picked up the item and slowly injected a stream of force into it. Stars gradually lit up on the seal. In the end it formed a strange pattern. If Emperor Zhou was here he would know that the pattern on it was exactly the same as the key to Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier in his hands. This was the only thing in the box that the Empress carefully hid. She had painstakingly copied this from Emperor Zhou secretly and found someone to carve it for her in private. She hid it for so many years just for this day. Buzz. Ripples suddenly appeared on the barrier. Then an entrance appeared in front of Rong Jin. His heart crazily beat and it was about to jump out of his mouth. Then his figure flashed and he entered the barrier. He didn't see that the barrier didn't close immediately after he entered. Instead, a strange pattern appeared on it. It was as if a gust of wind passed by. After a while, a faint light appeared on the barrier and it finally closed again. Everything returned to normal. At this point, a group of people happened to pass by. Seeing that the barrier was perfectly fine, they didn't stop and continued forward. In the imperial mausoleum, Chu Luiyue sat on the throne. The golden walls in all directions had been stacked up high. Finally, they stopped when they were about to touch the river. The entire space seemed to have frozen and only the barrier around Chu Luiyue was crazily burning. Chu Luiyue estimated that 15 minutes had passed, but the barrier was too strong so the progress was very slow. After some time, a crack finally appeared on the barrier in front of her. The barrier broke. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 399. After making the first breakthrough, the rest of the matters progressed much more smoothly. The surrounding barrier that was suffused with a faint golden color was like ice. Under the burning of the transparent hellfire, it quickly melted. A flame fell and instantly ignited the golden barrier. Whoosh! With a crackling sound, the transparent flame instantly spread out along the ground. In an instant, the entire golden barrier was enveloped by the transparent flame. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that the countless pentagonal crystals accumulated on the barrier were gradually scattering into sand. Gradually, the same thing happened to the other golden barriers. Chu Luiyue was almost as if she was surrounded by endless hellfire. Fortunately, perhaps because the heavenly square cauldron had already recognized her as its master, she did not feel any burning sensation. On the other hand, Dumpling could not take it anymore and hid back again. When the first golden barrier completely disappeared and turned into scattered sand again, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a strange force flowing into her body along the transparent hellfire. She blinked her eyes in surprise. The golden crystal contains abundant energy. When you use the hellfire to burn it, it is almost equivalent to extracting all the energy from it. The legendary three-eyed eagle suddenly spoke, its tone as cold as ever. But if one listened carefully, one could feel a slight fluctuation of unfairness. It had only followed Chu Luiyue for a short period of time, but it had already seen with its own eyes that she had encountered so many opportunities. It was not an exaggeration to say that such luck was heaven-defying. Even it could not help but feel waves of emotions. It had lived for so long, but it had never seen anyone with better luck than Chu Luiyue. Most people felt that cultivation depended on talent first and hard work second. But in reality, the most important thing was luck. Chu Luiyue, on the other hand, had all three of these qualities. Now it seemed to understand why the heavenly square cauldron was willing to recognize Chu Luiyue as its master. It even began to feel that Chu Luiyue's promise to help it recover its physical body was not as ridiculous as it seemed at the beginning. If it continued to develop like this, Chu Luiyue might really become one of the people standing at the peak in the future. Chu Luiyue did not know that the legendary three-eyed eagle had thought so much in this short period of time. After a while, she asked with uncertainty, I am also cultivating like this? The legendary three-eyed eagle sneered. When you cultivate, are you so efficient? Chu Luiyue. Was it praising her luck or saying that her cultivation was slow? But this was not important. What was important was that there were hundreds of golden barriers here. If she burned all of these, wouldn't her strength increase greatly? Ever since she entered the mausoleum, she had been tense. Chu Luiyue clenched her fists and felt the rich force flowing in her body. She couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought that he would stumble upon such a good thing? If she could absorb all these powers, she would definitely, in that case, she should be grateful of the hellfire, right? Where is he? Chu Luiyue's expression turned serious. The two of them fell from the round plate together, but she did not see Mu Qinghe's figure until now. Could he be in trouble now? This thought flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, but she quickly threw it to the back of her mind. Even if Mu Qinghe was in trouble, it was not her place to worry. With his strength, it should be more than enough to deal with the troubles in the mausoleum. Chu Liyue shook her head and threw these distracting thoughts away. She sat cross-legged on the throne, held her breath and began to cultivate. She closed her eyes and placed her hands on her knees. The heavenly square cauldron returned to her dantian. With a thought, she suddenly raised her hand. A transparent karmic fire flew out. Vigorous power surged from the surroundings and entered Chu Liyue's body. Her entire body felt as if it was soaking in a hot spring, warm and comfortable. The power flowed through her limbs and bones into her dantian, and finally gathered in the water droplet. It looked like a small droplet, but it was like a black hole silently swallowing all the power that flowed in. Gradually, a pattern appeared on the water droplet. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat and she increased her power. On one hand, she urged the karmic fire to burn, and on the other hand she absorbed the power contained in it. She did not know if it was an illusion, but she vaguely felt that the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron seemed to be burning more vigorously than before. This feeling was very subtle, but soon Chu Liyue confirmed her thoughts. The heavenly square cauldron had indeed absorbed the power in the golden fortress. Its overall aura was clearly stronger than before. Even the legendary three-eyed eagle was shocked. How could this be? The heavenly square cauldron is actually absorbing the power here? Chu Liyue did not know, but it knew. The heavenly square cauldron was a supreme sacred object, and it would not touch ordinary heaven and earth force at all. Therefore, although it had been suppressed for 1,000 years and had been severely damaged, the heavenly square cauldron had never moved. Except for one kind of power. But how could there be one here? Chu Liyue did not know what the legendary three-eyed eagle was thinking, and she thought it was just surprised by this scene. There was a strange connection between her and the heavenly square cauldron, so she knew very well that the heavenly square cauldron looked intact, but in reality it was not. Now it seemed to be repairing itself on its own accord. This was naturally a good thing for Chu Liyue. After confirming this, Chu Liyue quickly withdrew her thoughts and continued to concentrate on her cultivation. The surrounding golden fortress was constantly melting under the burning of the transparent karmic fire. Piles of scattered golden sand appeared on the ground. The aura on Chu Liyue's body was also constantly strengthening. After an unknown period of time, Chu Liyue suddenly felt as if she had touched an invisible barrier. Her heart skipped a beat. That was the sign of breaking through to a stage 3 warrior. At this moment, a second pattern appeared on the water droplet in her dantian. The more it was like this, the calmer Chu Liyue became. She methodically continued to absorb the power. She knew that she was not the same as ordinary cultivators. With the suppression of the water droplet, it would be more difficult for her to break through to a stage 3 warrior than others. But gradually, Chu Liyue discovered another problem. The yuan meridian in her body seemed to be unable to withstand the impact of so much power and began to ache faintly. At first, it was only a slight tingling, but it quickly developed into an intense pain all over her body. That frightening power continuously washed over her yuan meridian, almost tearing it apart. Chu Liyue tried to reduce the influx of power, but to her horror she found that she could not stop it at all. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 400. She tried again, but it was to no avail. It was as if a huge sluice gate had been opened and the flood was pouring down. It was not that easy to close the sluice gate again. That terrifying power was still washing Chu Liyue's yuan meridian. Following this process, the pain all over her body became more and more intense. Chu Liyue clenched her teeth, and a trace of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She finally felt a little worried. If this continued, her yuan meridian would not be able to withstand it. It would be injured at best and destroyed at worst. Chu Liyue did not want her yuan meridian to be damaged again. Legendary three-eyed eagle, do you have any ideas? In a moment of desperation, Chu Liyue did not care about anything else. The legendary three-eyed eagle also realized that something was wrong, but when it heard Chu Liyue's words, its reply was even colder. You are the owner of the heavenly square cauldron. If even you can't control it, how can I? It was trapped inside. Although it did not want to admit it in this aspect, it was indeed incomparable to Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue's heart slowly sank. Was she really going to sit here and wait for death? The heavenly square cauldron is not the only thing you can't control, right? The legendary three-eyed eagle's words immediately woke Chu Liyue up. She carefully sensed it and shockingly realized that she could not stop the process. On one hand, it was because of the heavenly square cauldron. On the other hand, it was because of the water droplet in her body. Whether it was the heavenly square cauldron or the water droplet, they both seemed to desire the power of the golden fortress. Hence, they were constantly absorbing it. She wanted to stop, but she was being attacked from both inside and outside. Chu Liyue clenched her fists and her body tensed up. This was not the first time she could not control the water droplet. No, it should be said that from the beginning until now, she had never been able to take the initiative. She finally could not hold it in anymore. She clenched her teeth and shouted at the water droplet in her heart. Hey, you should at least consider my life. Although she wanted to break through, she did not want her body to explode and die. The two lines on the water droplet swayed slightly. For some reason, Chu Liyue actually felt a trace of disdain. In the next moment, a tiny water droplet flew out from it. With a bang, it transformed into a myriad of splashes and flew towards Chu Liyue's limbs and bones. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. Wait a minute. Didn't she experience the same thing when she repaired her Yuan meridian? At that time, it was because of this extra step that she was able to obtain the Daijing Yuan meridian. Chu Liyue's heartbeat suddenly quickened. Immediately after, she could clearly feel those tiny water droplets fusing into Chu Liyue's Yuan meridian. Faint starlight appeared clearly. As expected, the pain in that area instantly disappeared. Chu Liyue subconsciously held his breath. This water droplet was indeed able to temper the Yuan meridian. Very quickly, the Yuan meridian in her entire body had been thoroughly nourished. It became even more lustrous and tough. The pain from before had completely disappeared, and the energy from the outside had begun to surge into Chu Liyue's body at an even faster speed. Chu Liyue felt the Yuan meridian in her body, and her heart was beating wildly. In fact, the Daijing Yuan meridian was also divided into 3 grades: upper, middle, and lower. Although she also had the Daijing Yuan meridian before, it could only be considered as lower, and barely reached the threshold of the Daijing Yuan meridian. But now she could clearly feel that her Yuan meridian had become stronger than before. If she continued to temper it, perhaps she would one day possess the Tianjing Yuan meridian again. Suddenly, Chu Liyue had an idea. She controlled the force that had just surged in and struck towards her dantian. Crack! A soft sound rang in her mind. On the round and clear water droplet, the 3rd line slowly appeared. Rank 3 warrior. Digression: there will be a small supper later. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 401. When the 3rd line appeared, Chu Liyue suddenly felt her entire body's Yuan meridian brighten up. She had really broken through to the medium level of the Daijing Yuan meridian. Everything happened too quickly. Chu Liyue did not even have time to react. She only felt her body fill with power. Something was surging in her chest, causing her to unconsciously look up to the sky and roar. A ferocious and crazy power spread out from her body. Boom, boom, boom. Beams of energy surged in all directions. The transparent karmic fire exploded one after another, instantly destroying the remaining golden barrier. Golden sand flew. There was a sudden movement above her head. Chu Liyue looked up and saw the floating river above her head suddenly flow faster. Gradually, a vortex actually appeared in the centermost position. Chu Liyue suddenly had a premonition. The next moment, her body flew up uncontrollably. She disappeared into the whirlpool. After Chu Liyue's figure completely disappeared, the entire space fell silent again. Moments later, the golden sand on the ground began to slide back along the cracks. The lonely throne suddenly shattered. It turned into countless fragments and was completely annihilated. On the other side, although Chu Liyue was forced into the whirlpool, she did not feel any discomfort. The water flow was slow and gentle, as if it did not have any offensive power. However, the heavy power contained in it made Chu Liyue not dare to let down her guard. She looked around and realized that she was in the middle of the river. However, there seemed to be a transparent barrier around her that blocked everything. After looking for a while, she only had one word in her heart to describe the current scene: dazzling. At this moment, she could clearly see that the bright silver spots in the river were actually pentagonal sequins. They mixed together and emitted a dazzling light. They reflected on each other, making the entire river appear incomparably brilliant, like the Milky Way in the dark night. Chu Luiyue felt that she was being swept forward by the water flow, but she did not know where she was going. She curiously moved closer and looked at the sequins. Suddenly, her gaze focused as if she saw a scene flash past one of the sequins. However, the sequins quickly floated away and Chu Luiyue could not see it clearly. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked at the other sequins. After a while, she saw a figure appear on one of the sequins. Unfortunately, the sequins seemed to be covered by a layer of gauze, and the figure's appearance could not be seen clearly. Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while but still could not see it clearly. She suddenly recalled the previous scene. When the man in the black robe appeared and told her to look up, she saw that strange yet familiar scene. Could it be related to these things? Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about this, her eyes lit up. A surge of power came from behind her and lifted her up. Her body finally jumped out of the river. He landed on a piece of land. When she stabilized herself, she was shocked. This was actually a lake. The water was clear and calm. The water. At the edge of the lake in front of her, there was a huge golden dragon's head. At this moment, silver river water flowed out of it quietly and poured into the lake. She seemed to have come in from there just now. Chu Luiyue looked back and her pupils constricted. At this moment, she was actually standing on a square platform built in the middle of the lake. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.